Okay, so this might not be that long of a stream, but we're going to be talking about this issue that a lot of people have been messaging me about on YouTube. So this is going to be a discussion about, well, we can talk about CES, because CES 2023 is going on this week, as everybody knows. But the larger issue here, or the larger topic that we're probably going to talk about most of the stream, is the made by AMD 7900 XTX defective vapor chamber issue. For those of you that haven't been paying attention to this or are unaware of this, if you have been out of the loop on graphics cards, that's fine. You're probably better off, to be honest. But for those of you that have been asking me about this particular problem, regardless of whether you asked me about it or not, we're going to dig into not just the issue, how to avoid the issue, but we're also going to talk about the entire supply chain, all the different parties involved in this, on AMD's side of the fence, and we're going to see, ultimately what's going to happen, how it's going to play out. But I think the TLDR is AMD's probably going to handle this by doing RMAs on a case-by-case basis. It's going to be the slower, cheaper route for them to do, because a mass recall is going to be very expensive for them, and I don't know at this point, I don't know that if they know, so within a given batch that has faulty vapor chambers, what I don't know as of yet, and I don't think anybody publicly really knows this, I don't even know if AMD actually knows the answer to this, but what we don't know is, are all of the vapor chambers in a given batch defective, or is it only a subset of vapor chambers in a given batch? So I guess to illustrate this, let's use paint. So if we have, for example, the RX 7900 XTX reference card, or I guess reference card. Let's just say that. Let's use that as an example. In fact, what I'm going to do is copy this image, and we will leave that up. Go back over here. Just paste this in. So, what this means... Okay, now I've just made the picture look really ugly. So let's try this again. Basically, if you purchased an AMD graphics card that looks like this, irrespective of what the logo was on the box, meaning it could be a Sapphire logo, it could be a Power Color logo, it could be an Asus, a Gigabyte, any of those guys, any of them, XFX, if the card looks like this, if it has this design, it could be affected by this issue. So, because I know, I was reading Reddit threads, I've been looking at videos of people posting an example of this issue, and I read some of the comments, and people are saying if mine is from Sapphire, does that mean mine's affected, or is it only ones that were ordered directly off of AMD? The answer is yes, it could be affected, because if it looks like this, if it's the reference card, it could be affected. So here's the thing that a lot of people don't know about the reference card. The reference card is built and made by a company in China called, well, it's a Hong Kong-based company called PC Partner. PC Partner is contracted by AMD to develop or to assemble the actual reference card. So PC Partner, based in HK, so we'll just say Hong Kong, contracted by AMD to build the reference card. We'll just say that. So PC Partner is the builder. Now, if we're trying to figure out who's to blame here, people who don't know anything will say AMD's to blame. People who think they understand the supply chain will say PC Partner is to blame. But the reality is actually neither one of them are fully at fault here, because, so we'll just put AMD. AMD designs the GPU die and the reference card. So they design the reference card. They don't actually build, they don't mass produce the reference card. Does not mass produce the reference card. PC Partner, based in Hong Kong, is contracted by AMD to build / mass produce the reference card. So PC Partner makes the reference card. This has been a thing for many, many years. This is not new. This is not new news. They've been using PC Partner for more than a decade to build the reference card. So PC Partner built the blower style coolers for them, like back in the day. Like, for example, the 7970 X, or the 7970, the 7950, those reference cards, all the Pitcairn reference cards, the Hawaii GPUs are really loud. So PC Partner built all these. So they were the ones who mass produced it. Now, that doesn't mean that PC Partner is to blame, because all PC Partner does is they take all the different parts of the GPU. So they take the GPU die, the PCB boards, the coolers, the fans, all the plastic shroud, metal shroud, whatever. They solder everything, assemble everything, and then package it up and then ship it out to whatever region it's going to go to. So that's PC Partner's role. That doesn't mean that PC Partner is to blame. To understand like what's going to happen here in the back end, we have to look at actually who manufactures the actual vapor chamber itself. So the vapor chamber and the fin array, aka the heatsink, that is actually going to be the root of the problem. So that leaves the question: who makes the vapor chamber? That's the real question. Because PC Partner doesn't make the vapor chamber, and AMD also does not produce the vapor chamber. Now, AMD probably designed the specifics. So I guess when it comes to things like how much liquid needs to be in the vapor chamber, like the surface area, the pressure levels that need to be in the vapor chamber, AMD probably designed that, I'm pretty sure. I'd be surprised if AMD left that to somebody else, because in that regard, then someone else is co-developing the graphics card. But that could be. So, I'm going to guess. Now, I don't mean to throw this company that I'm about to mention under the bus, but I think that Cooler Master is the producer, builds the vapor chamber heatsink. Why do I think Cooler Master is? Because now I'm being very careful in saying this, because I'm not trying to paint Cooler Master in a negative light. I'm not trying to say that they're at fault, because we don't know who is at fault. Because remember, it is assumed that AMD determined the specific amounts of things like the amount of liquid that needs to go in the vapor chamber, how big the vapor chamber needs to be, what are the dimensions, that sort of thing. That should come from AMD. But in terms of building and mass producing the heatsink and the vapor chamber, and then the mechanics of on the supply or the assembly line of filling it up with the coolant, which is typically water, and the water might actually have some level of salt in it, for example, because that could change the boiling point of the water. We're going to talk about the vapor chamber itself. We're going to do a deep dive in that in a little bit later on here. So if you're interested in figuring out how or learning how the vapor chamber actually works in detail, we are going to talk about that later. But these ultimately are the three companies who are going to shoulder a lot of the blame for this issue. So, and hey, Joey, one thing, so people, before people jump to conclusions saying, how do I know that Cooler Master is the one? Well, here, let me bring something up to kind of prove my point here. Well, first of all, I already know that AMD has used Cooler Master for a number of years to manufacture their reference coolers. So that's known to me. But what I'm going to reveal here is probably going to prove it. So, this is AMD's website, so AMD.com. You go here to download the drivers. If we go here, Windows 10, well, I'm on Windows 10, but it doesn't matter. Windows 10, Windows 11, whatever. So if you scroll down here, notice here's the latest driver. But if you scroll further down here, AMD Radeon RX 7900 XTX RGB tool. Now, this tool will only work on the reference card, the made by AMD, everyone's calling it the MBA XTX card. So it'll only work on that card. And if you look here, look at this. Download the Cooler Master RGB LED tool here. The Cooler Master RGB LED tool is compatible with AMD Radeon RX 7900 XTX graphics product, which includes optional LED lighting capability. Requires Adrenaline Edition 22.12.2 driver or later. So, there it is, folks. Cooler Master. Now, I even without this being on the website, I already knew that Cooler Master was the one who manufactured these coolers, because they're the ones who built the reference card for RDNA 2. They're the ones who built the Wraith Ripper for Threadripper. They're the ones who built the Prism Wraith cooler, the Prism or the Wraith Stealth cooler, the Wraith Max cooler. All those coolers that AMD's Ryzen CPUs use and the Radeon GPUs have all been done by Cooler Master. So, ultimately, when it comes down to who is probably the one that will be blamed for this, now, in the public's view, AMD is going to take the blame. That's already like a given. All these RMAs that they're going to have to do for this reference card, it's going to damage AMD's image in the public. It's going to make them look really bad. So they're going to shoulder the majority of the negative image here in the consumer's mind. But in reality, like internally, Cooler Master is actually the one who probably screwed up and probably didn't put enough water in some of the vapor chambers. Maybe, like Igor's lab is saying, there's like 5 or 6 batches. But the thing is, we don't know how big a batch is. Is a batch like how many that was built in a day, or how many that was built in an afternoon, or in a certain hour, or a 2-hour period? You know what I mean? So we don't really know like the extent of how many of these are affected. But ultimately, Cooler Master is going to have to source another set of vapor chambers or make new vapor chambers, but that's going to be, more time consuming. And that's the reason why, if you're doing an RMA, because you're one of the people that are unlucky with this pretty bad issue, to be honest, AMD's, going to have to wait on Cooler Master to build more vapor chambers and just assemble more cards via PC Partner. So these are kind of the 3 companies that deal with the reference card. Now, having said all of that, so these 3 are responsible for the design and manufacturing aspect. Now we're going to talk about the actual reselling and distribution of getting these out into the market. So the go-to-market strategy. So for that, we've got a different set of companies. So one of them is Digital River. Digital River is the online reseller, or I guess fulfillment center, or I guess fulfillment distributor, I should say, for the XTX cards purchased from AMD.com's store. So if you bought one of these directly from AMD, so AMD.com, regardless of where you are in the world, if you, well, okay, I don't know about like other regions, but if you're in North America, and you bought one of these reference cards recently from AMD.com, the actual distributor that you're dealing with when you pay or purchase the card is Digital River. So Digital River is the one that will have to handle the RMA. So when you open a support case, and it has to go to logistics, if it's determined that the card's going to be RMA'd, then that whole logistics of how that RMA is going to be handled, that's going to be done through Digital River. So that's one of them. Now the other one, so another one could be Newegg. So we all know Newegg. Newegg.com is another one. So this is an online reseller. We all know about Newegg. Another one could be Amazon, but Amazon is kind of different because Amazon typically doesn't really have a lot of these direct. Romulo, hey, so you're from Brazil, about the DisplayPort 20-pin problems. Is there any possibility? No, I highly doubt it. I don't think that it could be the DisplayPort cable, because the thing is, the DisplayPort cable, the voltage on the pin cannot change the power being generated by the GPU. That's not how it works. I think that the DisplayPort cable thing, I think that's people not understanding how multi-monitor works. But, you know, even with one monitor, I don't think that's related to this. This is definitely an issue specific to the vapor chamber manufactured from Cooler Master. So this is ultimately what this is about. So, yeah, I saw those posts about the cable. I don't think it has anything to do with the cable. So Amazon.com is another one. You know, obviously if you're outside of the US, so Mind Factory in Germany, there's a bunch of them. Basically, we won't really list these, but because these also sell AIB, but you guys understand, like any kind of online thing. We'll mention Digital River specifically because they are the ones who fulfill the cards from AMD.com. But I also want to mention the AIB because the add-in boards or the partners also sell the reference card. So Sapphire is one of them, XFX is one of them, Power Color is one of them, Asus is one of them, and Gigabyte. So these, I'm trying to make sure I didn't leave anyone out. Yeah, I'm pretty sure these are the ones. So it is worth noting, MSI does not sell any of the made by AMD reference cards. For some reason, MSI either can see the future and they knew this was going to happen, or they just didn't really care. But MSI somehow managed to avoid this entire fiasco by not selling the made by AMD edition. So these guys are all like they distributor. This is like a premier. I'll say they're like a tier. How do I want to say this? They're like a tier 1, top tier, I guess. Well, we won't say that. I won't say. I know which ones are the bigger ones. So for those that are curious, Sapphire is the biggest reseller, or I guess the premier partner for AMD graphics cards globally, and second biggest is Asus. In terms of volume, Asus and Sapphire ship and sell the most Radeon graphics cards globally. Then after that, it would be XFX and Power Color, and then followed by MSI and Gigabyte. MSI and Gigabyte tend to be... It kind of depends because, you know, Asus, Gigabyte, and MSI, they sell... Not only do they sell Radeon cards, but they also sell GeForce cards. But in terms of the amount of volume sales when it comes to Radeon cards, Asus and Sapphire are the two biggest ones. Even though XFX and Power Color are exclusive to AMD, Asus just outclasses them in terms of how much volume they push into the market. So, hey Romulo, thanks for the sub. Welcome to the channel. So hopefully you get some good info out of this, because the whole point here is to kind of clear up a lot of the confusion, because I have been looking online. I saw a lot of Reddit posts and was reading through some of the comments, and it's clear to me that there's a lot of people that don't understand. You're getting frame drops. Well, it's got to be on your end, Joel, because I'm showing zero dropped frames right here. But these are the distributors. So these guys basically AMD partner brand. So these guys basically all of them are the same. So AMD. What I'll say is this is an AMD exclusive, or I guess Radeon exclusive. And the same thing with this. This is a exclusive. What this means, for those wondering what it was mean to be exclusive, it means that these brands, these companies, they only sell Radeon graphics cards. They don't sell GeForce or NVIDIA graphics cards. So these are the Radeon exclusives. So because one thing I noticed is when I was reading some of the comments or the posts on Reddit in particular, on the AMD Reddit page, I don't normally go there, but for something big like this, I went to check out like what was the kind of the RMA experience, what was the general consensus by the public. And it was clear to me in reading some of the comments that people really don't understand the some people think that just because they bought one of these and it came in a power color box that they're immune to the problem, or if they have a sapphire box, they're not affected. That's completely false. Any of these brands that have, as long as it's a reference card. So if you bought an AMD 7900 XTX and it came in a box that has a sapphire, XFX, Power Color, Asus, or Gigabyte logo on the box, and when you open the box, the card looks like the card right above me, so the big card right up there, so this card right here, if your graphics card looks like this, it could be affected by this faulty vapor chamber. So these last two are Radeon partners. So they're not exclusive. So these guys do sell NVIDIA cards as well, but I think most people already knew that. And then MSI would be on this list, but MSI doesn't make the reference card, so we're not talking about them. Or, okay, they don't make the reference card. None of these guys make the reference card. That's another thing that I want to clear up. Sapphire, XFX, Power Color, Asus, Gigabyte, none of them actually assemble and build this card. The only company that builds this card is a company called PC Partner based in Hong Kong. Now, if people dig deep into the graphics world, people will find out that PC Partner has their own graphics card brand. That brand is known as Zotac. PC Partner is if Zotac is Batman, PC Partner is Bruce Wayne. Let's just put it that way. Okay? So Zotac is a GeForce, meaning it's an NVIDIA exclusive partner. But PC Partner, the true identity of Zotac, actually builds AMD's reference cards. So how crazy is that? Not only do you have Zotac selling NVIDIA, their own custom AIB NVIDIA GeForce cards, you also have them building AMD's reference cards, both the XTX and the XT. Now, it's been like this for more than a decade. So all the 6900 XT, the 6800 XT, the 5700 XT, the Vega 64, all those reference cards, all of them have been always made by PC Partner. It's always been PC Partner. And the company that made the heatsink has always been Cooler Master. So if you guys want to blame somebody, although I don't think it's fair to blame any one of these companies, because mistakes happen, but if you had to point the finger at one of these companies, it would be Cooler Master, because Cooler Master is the one that manufactured the vapor chamber, and this is a vapor chamber problem. So Cooler Master somewhere screwed up. One of the employees on the line probably, calibrated the water fill tank too low, We're going to talk about how the vapor chamber works here in a little bit, and that's the ultimate root cause of the problem. But this is what you need to be aware of. So I guess one more thing, what I'll show you guys now, we'll just go to Newegg just to kind of show an example, just to re-illustrate a point. So this card right here, Sapphire, so notice how it says Sapphire, but it is the reference card. So meaning just because it's sold by Sapphire, this doesn't mean that this is immune to the problem. So there's a chance that this card sold by Sapphire off of Newegg is affected, just like the one sold directly from AMD.com, which would then be sold through Digital River or fulfilled through Digital River. So anything that looks like that reference card is affected. Now, these other cards, so these are what a lot of people call AIB custom cards, because these have different coolers. These are definitely not affected. So if you have a Nitro or if you have a Pulse from Sapphire, these are definitely not affected because they don't use that Cooler Master vapor chamber. Now that doesn't mean that if they have a vapor chamber, now for instance the Nitro, this does have a vapor chamber. But the thing is, it's not the same vapor chamber. It's clearly different. The dimensions of it are different. The cooler itself is completely different. So it may not even be made by Cooler Master. So Sapphire could have used a different company to mass produce those actual vapor chambers for the Nitro. But that only applies to the Nitro. So it's another thing. So my recommendation for those wanting to avoid this issue entirely and don't want to just buy a GeForce card or don't want to just buy nothing, like if you can, try to get one of these AIB cards. So like the Red Devil, this is not affected. It's completely different. In fact, the Red Devil doesn't even have a vapor chamber. The Red Devil just uses a direct contact heat pipe. Or like it's literally no vapor chamber under there. Hopefully somebody will do a teardown, but I know for a fact that this doesn't have a vapor chamber. And then the ASRock Taichi, I don't know what this one uses, but it's a custom variant, so it's not affected. And then the other thing I will say is, people might ask about the XT. So the XT card made by AMD, which is this one right here, this is not affected either. So this one, it doesn't use the same vapor chamber, so it's not affected. So I think that kind of clears that up. So now let's talk about how the vapor chamber works. And why I think there's a difference when you do horizontal mount versus vertical mount. So, because one thing that in Derbauer's video, which was actually pretty interesting, the most interesting test he did was he started a test where he was running Furmark and he had the card in the vertical position. So if we draw that out, how would I draw that? So if this is the card, just like how you see it there, this is the PCIe connector. So if he has it connected onto the motherboard and it's basically standing up straight, so he has it mounted here to the post here or whatever, right? And then you have the power cables 1 and 2 like this. So if it's mounted this way and the fans are spinning, when it's like this, he wasn't noticing the thermal throttling 110, the infamous 110C. I call this, when I think of this problem, I call this problem the XTX 110C. So this is the 110C issue. So when it's like this, meaning it's vertically mounted, it doesn't seem to overheat. Now, at one point, he rotated it while Furmark was running, so he made it horizontal. So when he did that, now it's running like this, how you would normally see it in a computer case, where it's mounted like that. The power cables are probably like this, and you can't really see the fans, but you can see the fin stack is like this. So when it's like this, meaning when it's horizontal with the PC, with the motherboard, when it's like that, if this is the motherboard, then it hits the 110C. So then it overheats. So the question is, why does it do that? Well, for that, we have to understand how vapor chambers behave. So in a vapor chamber, you have... How would I draw this? So let's draw this where it's in the horizontal configuration. So the GPU die is actually up on top. So that's the GPU die. Here you have the vapor chamber is making contact there. We'll just draw it kind of like this. In this case, the vapor chamber is a very long shape. We'll just draw it kind of like that. So this up here is the GPU die. And when your Bauer flipped it back, it stayed at 1T, which is really weird. Yeah, I'm going to explain why that happens. So the reason why that happens, so on this vapor chamber, you got to remember, when it's horizontal, the fin stack is actually on the bottom. So all those fins, the aluminum fins, are all here on the bottom. This is where the GPU makes contact. So this thing, I'm going to kind of highlight it in black. Think of that as kind of the thermal paste. So the thing in black here, that's the thermal paste. And then you have it actually touching the vapor chamber or the copper base plate. That's the top part of the vapor chamber. So inside the vapor chamber, you notice if you watch his video where he drilled through it, so he did like a cross-section cut to show the inside. So inside, there were like these cylinder-like structures. So that's called sintered metal. Sintered metal, think of it like if metal was like sand. Like think of sand, how you can, when it's very dry, it just kind of like, you know, it's almost like dust. And when sand is wet, it's more like clay. You can mold it, you can shape it. So this is sintered metal. So it's metal that's kind of like dust or sand, but it's pressed together under pressure in a small, confined area. Gamers X is a similar one once. Oh, yeah, I saw that video. Yeah, it's kind of like a metal dust. So think of it like that. So that's called sintered metal. So those columns, essentially what they do, because they're sintered, they allow the fluid, in this case it's water, to basically kind of sit near, or kind of stick around there near the underside of the GPU die, so it's close proximity to the GPU. The reason why you want that is because with the water near the GPU, when the GPU heats up, the water will absorb the heat. One thing this kind of gets into is thermodynamics. So typically, when you have high temperature and low temperature, or you have a heat source and you have a void where there's no heat will always flow to where it's cold, and it never goes the other way around. So remember, heat will always flow to cold. It'll always travel in the direction toward where it's cold. It will never go cold to hot. It's always hot to cold in terms of where the heat will transfer. So you want the water near the GPU die because water has a very high heat capacity, meaning the water can literally sit there around like very warm or hot metal, like copper, for instance, which is heating up around it, and the water will stay relatively cold. It makes sense, right? Like when you go to boil water, if you're going to cook something, or anytime you boil water, notice how it takes so long to boil water, but the kettle or the metal surface can get really, really hot very quick relative to the water inside. And that's because water has a very high heat capacity. That's the reason why liquid cooling works the way it does. So it's no different here. This is just, think of this as a really, really tiny radiator, because that's essentially what this is. So you got water near this thing. So when you start heating it up, because the GPU is going to be the source of the heat, you have the heat from the GPU flowing to where it's cold. Well, in this thing, inside the vapor chamber, where is the coldest point? Well, it's obviously going to be the water itself. So the heat is going to transfer. I guess I should use a different color. So we'll use red. So the heat flows toward the water in the sintered material, and the water will then, at some point, the water will collect the heat, and it'll slowly raise its own temperature. So the liquid temperature will slowly go up, but it takes a long time for water to boil, because the boiling point of water is 100 degrees Celsius. Now remember, the hot spot, the throttle point, is 110 Celsius, so it's above boiling water. Normally, under normal conditions, the water has to go to 100 degrees Celsius before it turns into a gas, which is basically when it's in the vapor form. So what they do to avoid that, because you don't actually want the water to go all the way to 100 degrees, because that means that the GPU relative to the water is going to be way, way higher than 100 degrees. You know, it might be like 165 or some really, really high number. There'll be a big delta between the water temperature and the actual GPU temperature, the hotspot temperature. So you don't want the water to boil or vaporize at 100 degrees. So there's a way to control that. What you want to do is you want to actually lower the boiling point of the water, meaning you want the water to evaporate faster than it normally would. Meaning you want to tweak the water so that it actually vaporizes before it goes to 100 degrees. So in this case, the way you can do that is by manipulating the water. You can do things like you can change the pressure that the water's under. So if you have higher pressure, for instance, that's going to alter the boiling point of the water. If you have lower pressure, that's also going to alter the boiling point of the water. Another way that I was thinking that you could alter the boiling point is by adding different materials. Like, for example, salt. Adding salt to the water will change the boiling and the freezing temperature for water. So there are ways to offset. It's funny, we were talking about curve optimizer the other day, but now we're talking about offsetting the boiling point of water. So, yeah, you can change the composition of the liquid by adding things like maybe sulfates or salts or some sort of compounds into the water so that it changes the boiling point. Because essentially what you want is you want the water to vaporize earlier than 100 degrees. Maybe something like, 85 degrees or 75 degrees Celsius. So you want it to vaporize faster, because when you have it vaporizing, so when the water turns into a gas, what happens is it rises, right? Because when water's in its gas, it's going to be a gas. It's going to be floating around. So it's going to be floating around inside this chamber, and as it goes up, it's going to kind of like flow around. It's basically going to spread out when it's in gas form. And then as it gets further away from the heat source, it's going to cool down. It's also going to spread the heat further out to things like the fin stack. So these metal fins on the radiator stack are actually going to pull heat away from the vapor and from the actual source itself. That's how you sink the heat, aka the name heat sink. So as it gets further away, at some point, traveling away from the GPU, it will condense and it will turn back into a liquid, and then the liquid will then kind of flow back to the, down here. So the way they have it built is the way it's designed internally, once it's in liquid form, it'll kind of flow back to the middle, it'll flow back to that sintered metal, and it'll just go in a big cycle. So it'll flow back, it'll be near the GPU again, and then it'll slowly raise temperature, turn back into a gas, then spread out across the chamber, then condense back into water, and it becomes a big cycle. Right, it's like it's like a precipitation cycle. So that's how it works when it's in the horizontal configuration. So what's interesting is when it's in the vertical configuration. When it's in the vertical configuration, the only difference is, just to kind of draw that, the GPU is on its side. So the GPU would be, well, I guess we can delete this top one here. The only difference here is the GPU is going to be on its side. So the die would be here, the thermal paste is here, and then now you have the vapor chamber just kind of goes this way. It's kind of hard to illustrate it, but you guys get what I'm saying. Like, it goes out this way. It's kind of like this. So, or I guess the die is kind of more like a square here, or I guess it's more like this. So the only difference here, well, it is quite a significant difference actually, is the liquid, because of gravity, the liquid will go like this. It'll like float to this small thin area, because remember, this is really thin. I'm trying to draw it three-dimensional, but kind of like if this is in 3D, think of it like the vapor chamber is this rectangular box essentially, and the cycle actually ends up working better because it's a smaller loop. It floats up, but then it like spreads, and then it falls back down pretty quick. And then it just kind of collects here. The thing is, because it's on its side, the sintered metal is like, oh man, it's really hard for me to draw it. But essentially, you have a smaller surface area for the water. So because you have a smaller surface area for the water, the liquid can't spread out as far from the GPU. So in this case, the problem is that there's not enough liquid. So when there's not enough liquid, you can see how it's going to become a problem when it's horizontal. Because when it's horizontal, if there's a smaller amount of liquid, what happens is, well, I think there's one of two things are happening. Either when it's horizontally mounted, when all the water vaporizes, there's just not enough water to create that cycle. So basically, everything turns into a gas, all the water evaporates, and then it's all in its gas form. But because there's not enough liquid, it just stays in the gas form. It can't precipitate back because the heat from the GPU die is high enough such that the water just stays in its gas form. Meaning, even out here, where it's far away, like even out here at the furthest point out, it stays as a gas because there's enough heat radiating out from the GPU die that the water isn't able to cool off. There's not enough liquid in the tank. There's not enough water to condense back into a liquid. It'll just stay in its gas form the whole time and just be floating around in the chamber as a gas the whole time. When it's horizontal, the air gets trapped at the top when there's not enough fluid because the flat plate is the highest point. Well, it's really just that there's not enough liquid to condense. The GPU is generating enough of a heat load that it's keeping all of the liquid in its gas state. Nothing's condensing back into liquid. Because that's why the amount of liquid matters, because if you have more liquid, then you can get that cycle going, where there's enough liquid that's able to condense back into water, and then turns back into gas, and then turn back into water, and turn back into gas. If there's not enough liquid, all the liquid just turns to gas, and there's no cycle, because the heat is greater than the ability for the water to condense back. So it has to do with the amount of water and the heat capacitance of the water. And also, of course, like how hot the GPU runs. Because this explains why when people power limit the card, so when they do like minus 15% on the power slider, they're less likely to see the problem because they're throwing less heat. They're using less power, which means less heat. So there's less of a heat load on the water. So you have, water that can actually do the cycle when you're running the GPU undervolted and or power limited. Yeah, there's not enough condensation happening. So that's ultimately the problem. And then when it's vertical, I guess just to finish drawing this out, so when it's vertical, because it's a more confined area for the water because of gravity, so it spreads, but then it condenses out more quickly. It's able to condense out along this vertical area. It's interesting because it's almost like when it's vertical, you would think that you would think that it would almost have the same problem, but I guess it's because there's enough. I guess there's enough water that can pool at the bottom of the vapor chamber that it's just able to keep the cycle going better. I don't know. It's interesting. Are you asking if I'm using the XTX? Yeah, I've got an XTX. But I don't have this card. I have the Red Devil. So I unfortunately I don't have the reference card, so I can't test the behavior. Because, I'm using an AIB card, and the Red Devil doesn't have this problem, because the Red Devil doesn't even use a vapor chamber. Power Color's answer was not to use a vapor chamber. They were literally just like, let's just put a really, really big 4-slot heatsink on it. Yeah. So, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, Cooler Master, I don't want to throw Cooler Master under the bus, because, right now AMD is getting all the hate for this, and, rightfully so, someone's got to take the blame, and then it is an AMD branded product, so they're the ones that are going to take the blame. But the ones who really messed up is actually Cooler Master, because Cooler Master is the one that made the vapor chamber. A lot of people don't know that, but and I'm pretty sure Cooler Master wants it to stay that way. I'm pretty sure Cooler Master doesn't want the public to know that they're the ones who actually made a faulty vapor chamber, because if people find this out, people are probably going to try to stay away from buying Cooler Master AIOs and that sort of thing. So this is kind of like secret knowledge. Like, people aren't supposed to know this. People aren't supposed to know that Cooler Master is the one that made the vapor chamber. Yeah, we broke down this entire thing in depth. So AMD designed the GPU and the reference card and the cooler, but they didn't actually make anything. They didn't manufacture the card. So Cooler Master made the vapor chamber and the heatsink and the fans. So this cooling design, the actual cooler, like the shroud and everything, that's all Cooler Master. So, and then the third company involved is PC Partner. PC Partner is the one who has the assembly line. They're the ones who actually put everything together. So Cooler Master ships them the vapor chambers and the fans. AMD ships them the GPU die and maybe the PCBs. And then PC Partner might actually make the PCB. So like the capacitors that are sourced from, whoever, the inductors, all the lumped circuit elements. Like PC Partner has all that stuff, and they have the factory line that puts everything together, all the actual line workers, any kind of thing that's soldered. Like, that's PC Partner. So if this was a VRM problem, then, they're the ones that are going to get blamed. But this is a vapor chamber problem, so, these are the guys that are actually responsible. It could also be the spec. Is AMD responsible? So AMD has the spec, but you got to remember, AMD told them the spec, and the fact that not every single card has the problem means that somebody on the assembly line over at Cooler Master screwed up. Somebody set the pressure too low for the fill valve. Something like that. They must have had a bad day or whatever. I don't think anybody maliciously intended to do this. I think it's clearly an honest accident, I'll say, because it's only certain batches, which means, now what I don't know, what I can't tell you, is I don't know how many batches. Now I know Igor's lab has been saying like 5 batches, maybe 6 batches. And the other side of that is, how many units are in a single batch? And what does a batch indicate? A batch could be a group of cards or a group of vapor chambers that were made on a Tuesday, or on Wednesday, or maybe it was like in an afternoon, or maybe it was in the morning, or maybe it was like this batch was made in this hour. You know what I'm saying? So no one really knows that sort of granularity. See, and the thing is, AMD might not actually know, because the only company that would really know is Cooler Master, and obviously they're going to stay quiet because they want to fly under the radar in terms of the public side. They don't want to draw attention to this, so they're not going to say anything. AMD probably is not going to say anything. AMD probably they might know, but that's going to be based off of what Cooler Master tells them. So, yeah, I don't know, and they may not want to reveal the actual batch number because they don't want to trace that to, it creates like a big political mess for these 3 companies. Yeah, no, they shouldn't do anything. I honestly think that AMD. So I saw Scott Herkelman's interview with PC World so Gordon interviewed him at CES. I think he did a good job with his response. I mean, like, what else can you do, right? Like, obviously it's not his fault. He's not the guy who actually filled the thing with water. So it's like, how can you blame him? So you know, it's probably just an honest accident, to be honest. But it shows, you know, just one little mistake, how much one little mistake on an assembly line can screw up on such an epic level. Yeah. So if you purchased it from AMD.com, if you do end up having the issue, you're gonna go through Digital River for the RMA. And then if you purchase it from Newegg or Amazon or, you know, some like Micro Center or some online outlet, and your box has one of these guys on the box, it could still be affected. As long as the card looks like this. As long as it's a reference card, because the reference cards are also sold through the partners, then I think the RMA has to go through one of these guys. But I really think that, honestly, I think you're within the 30 days or something. So I think if you bought it from like Newegg.com, you just go through Newegg, and then Newegg would handle it. At least that's what I would do. I don't think you have to deal with these guys unless it's like outside the return, exchange, whatever RMA window for the actual seller. Can that order be canceled? Well, see, the thing is, what I'm wondering, I assume that the cards that are listed for sale right as of right now are probably not affected, because I'm pretty sure what happened. So you guys remember when Scott Herkelman said it took them about 2 weeks to track it down? So a lot of that was, to be honest, what they ended up doing was they emailed, you know, PC Partner, hey, did something happen? We're getting a bunch of like cases coming in, you know, customers are saying that their cards are overheating. Like, can you guys double check your assembly line? So these guys probably said, nope, nothing's wrong. So then they got to look at the actual vapor chamber, right? And then that means they have to contact Cooler Master. Cooler Master doesn't assemble the card. All Cooler Master does is build the vapor chamber. So they got to go to Cooler Master. Then Cooler Master has to go and dig into their records. They got to find out, you know, okay, what's the serial number? Now we got to find out like which batch of cooler, which one was it? Was it the first one? Was it the second one? You know, there's a lot of inventory tracking that's going on. It's not like these companies can literally just like, you know, click a button on their computer and then it's like all the info's right there. So it's not like it's something that's super easy to do. So, yeah, well, the thing is, I think if you bought it off of Newegg, if you paid retail price, it should be from Newegg. If it was like some other number, God forbid it was some scalper or something, like a reseller on Newegg's third-party sales, like that, then that I'm not sure. That's where it gets really, really weird. Because in that sense, maybe you could go through the third-party resale. I've never had to do anything like that, so I'm not really familiar with that process. What I think is going to be even more of a headache is the scalpers on eBay are going to get so screwed over by this. It's going to be hilarious. Because can you imagine if a scalper tried to sell like 12 of these and they're all affected, and he's got like 12 different people complaining and trying to return it? And, you know, he scalped it, so he probably made, like, you know, $200 or whatever per card. And then now they're all trying to, like, return it to him, and he's like, what? And then he's going to have to open all these support cases with whoever he bought these off of. Oh, man. Oh, wow. This is a nightmare for scalpers. This is, like, the best thing that could happen to I guess, leave a bad taste in scalpers' mouths. Oh, man. Because eBay's buyer protection, you know, what's going to happen, right? Like, he's got to have to respond. Otherwise, eBay's just going to, like, take the money. They're going to, like send it back to the... They're going to put the money back in the buyer's account, and then the buyer has to figure out what to do with the card. They're supposed to return it. So that's just a mess. Oh man, that's terrible. Wow. Can you imagine if it was like the PS5? like if this was the PS5, scalpers would be so screwed. Oh man. Although this is way more expensive than the PS5, so maybe no, this is probably worse. Because this is like double the price. This is literally double the price of a PS5. Is my XT? Yes, my XT is a reference design. But it doesn't have the problem. I tested it thoroughly. Once I first figured out about this, like I started running like FurMark and all this stuff. I started looping 3D Mark and all those benchmarks. Obviously, I ran like games and stuff, and I never ran into the problem. So I really think that it was somebody at Cooler Master, you know, on a Tuesday or whatever, or maybe it was on a Friday. You know, they got like 2 hours left before they're off for the day, and they're looking forward to the weekend, and they're setting the parameters, you know, because it's all done on machine. So he's typing in the parameters, and it's probably something like, you know, 0.3 milliliters something per Kelvin, blah, 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 whatever. You have to key that in. And maybe he fat-fingered something, or she fat-fingered something on the computer, and not enough liquid, and there you go. And that's what started it. Who knows? I did not do that because my card is already mounted horizontal. So my card is already mounted in the worst case scenario, and I never had a problem with it in the horizontal. So I never bothered to test vertical, because vertical typically is the better scenario, right? Vertical, it runs cooler. So if mine is nowhere near close to overheating in the worst configuration possible, then I'm pretty sure it's good. But yeah, this is one that's gonna go down in history. You know, this one's gonna be one that AMD and Cooler Master especially isn't gonna forget. So the only good thing, the only upside of this, or the positive note on this, is that this will make companies like Cooler Master in this case be more alert, more vigilant. The workers are definitely going to be, at least, they're going to be way more on their toes when it comes to doing their job, like for the next several weeks to months. But I don't know. The good thing is it'll probably teach the manufacturers to put more checks in place for QA testing. Because I have a feeling, I bet when they test these cards over at PC Partner. So PC Partner. So I think there's going to be a lot of learnings from this. So AMD is probably going to have to learn, you know, that they potentially probably need to save up more RMA stock, possibly. I don't know. Because ultimately, I don't really think AMD could have really done anything here in mitigating this. But then, like PC Partner, I bet these guys only test the GPU in a specific configuration. They probably test... PC Partner probably tests the card in the vertical configuration. I don't think they test it in horizontal configuration, because when you look at most test beds are vertical. And you got to think about it. If you're on an assembly line and you're going to test the card to make sure it works, it's much easier to just grab a card off of the line and just plug it straight down into a motherboard slot than to, like, you know, take it and try to, like, line it up and plug it in horizontal. That's way more effort than like plugging it vertical. So I'm pretty sure they test these vertical, and I think no one was testing these horizontal. So PC Partner will probably update how they test the cards, because I think these guys could have caught it. These guys probably failed to catch it due to how they test them. That's my guess, because that would be the only way to explain. That's the only explanation as to why nobody caught this ahead of time. So you can partially blame PC Partner for that. So, you know, you can kind of shift the blame. Like Cooler Master can blame them, and they can point the finger at them saying, oh, you guys didn't test in the horizontal configuration, so it's your fault, because you should have caught this and let us know, right? So they might get some of the blame, but ultimately these guys built it and it was faulty. So, you know, then they might say, well, you guys built it, so it's your fault. Right, and then AMD is like, well, you know, we're shouldering the blame, everybody's blowing up on Reddit and they're blaming us. So, but yeah, I guess to your point on what AMD can do, AMD can probably like ask that they send one of every batch. Now, I don't know how practical that is, because it could be that more than one batch is produced in one day. So, but they could do something like set aside like one of every batch, send it in, and have them test it. Or the easiest thing to do, guys, though, is just test it horizontally and vertically at the factory line. That's all they got to do. So it's really a simple thing that PC Partner's got to update. The only benefit of this is that in the long run, this will help revise manufacturing policies. Not just for AMD reference cards, but for all graphics cards. So that's kind of the positive. You want to look at a positive on this whole thing? Yeah, horizontal is the most common one. But reviewers, when reviewers test graphics cards, like whenever they say open test bench, they're pretty much plugging the card in, and it's almost always going in vertical. They literally plug into the test bench. So that's why I don't like when reviewers test open bench. That's why when you guys watch me, when I review a graphics card, I will always review it in an actual computer case and will always be in the typical horizontal config, because that is how I personally would use the card in my own desktop. So like all my reviews, because I reviewed the Red Devil, I reviewed the Reference XT card, I tested them in an actual computer case with the side panel closed. So typical how your average gamer would be using the card in a computer case, that is how I test the graphics cards. But I know a lot of reviewers on YouTube, they test with an open test bed, so which means they typically plug them in vertical. So, and that could be why, who knows? Maybe some of the review samples are bad, and just no one noticed because they weren't testing them that way. So your reference is getting put into a custom-built PC for me by an experienced builder. He will stress test for 2 to 3 days before delivering to me. Well, just tell him that, well, okay, as long as it's being installed in horizontally, that's the easiest way to see the problem. If you test it vertical, you're not going to see the problem. It has to be horizontal to see the problem, for the reasons we just described in these diagrams. Because when it's horizontal, if there's not enough liquid, the liquid spreads out too thin and then it just all vaporizes and then it's gone. But when it's vertical, see, you've got more liquid down here at the bottom that can kind of pool up, so you're more likely to have some reserve water in the vapor chamber when it's vertical. Because you'll have this small pool of liquid down here that is basically maintaining the hotspot temperature like normal, even though it's not enough liquid. That's the reason why it works fine when it's vertical, but it doesn't work when it's horizontal. It's for Cooler Master. The irony of that statement. Oh, and just, I don't know if you guys were watching this earlier, but I'm not trying to throw Cooler Master under the bus, but this is, okay, if you want any more proof, check this out. So here's AMD.com. Here's the page to download the drivers and software. So check this out. Right here, here's the driver link, but look at this. AMD Radeon 7900 XTX RGB tool. Download the Cooler Master RGB LED tool here. The Cooler Master RGB LED tool is compatible with AMD Radeon RX 7900 XTX graphics product, which includes optional LED lighting capability. Requires AMD software, Adrenaline, blah, blah, blah. There you go. There is the final nail in the coffin. That is the identity of the culprit, so to speak. So, there we go. Now we know exactly who made the cooler. I'm not blind guessing. It's not like I don't know what I'm talking about. But there's further proof for you guys that Cooler Master made the shroud with the fans and the vapor chamber and the aluminum heatsink. And notice how it's only for the XTX graphics card. Well, the only reason why that's mentioned is because the XT doesn't actually have any RGB. That's the only reason. There we go. So that's the big reveal. That's the final proof of who actually made it. Now I'm not trying to blame them because we kind of talked about like ways this could have been mitigated, but you know, there you go. That's it. That's all I'm gonna say on that. so that's the final proof. That's the sort of thing that if I was like the CEO of Cooler Master, this would be making me sweat so bad right now. The name is mentioned twice in regarding the made by AMD reference card. So I think that pretty much sums it up. Like, I'm trying to think what else I want to say. So, okay, I will say one thing. For those that aren't familiar with PC Partner has another name. I was saying this earlier. I made an analogy. I said if PC Partner is Bruce Wayne, then there is another. It is known by another name, which would basically be Batman. And that name, if anybody knows, I'm just gonna go ahead and reveal it. Zotac. Zotac is PC Partner, or I guess PC Partner is the true identity of Zotac. So let that sink in, because Zotac is an NVIDIA exclusive AIB partner. But PC Partner is the true identity of Zotac. And PC Partner manufactures the made by AMD graphics cards. Secrets revealed. Man, I didn't think this stream was going to become like a secrets revealed stream, but I mean, that's what it's turned into, apparently. So, Zotac, the one who people seem to not think much of when it comes to NVIDIA AIB partners, is actually the exclusive manufacturer of all the AMD reference cards. Only the AMD reference cards. So, and this is not new. They've been doing this for years. So PC Partner made Vega 64 blower style coolers, the 5700 XT reference blower style cooler, the nice looking Radeon 7 cooler was made by PC Partner, aka Zotac, but they will never go by that name. Zotac is the one that will not be named when it comes to talking about AMD Radeon. So that's kind of how that works. Yeah, that's it. That's Zotac and PC Partner are the same company. So they've made a lot of bad stuff. Well, I don't know about that. I know for some reason people seem to not like Zotac. I said, so back when I was talking about the NVIDIA, the RTX 4090, like back when we covered the 4090 launch, I said on stream, because we were looking at the various different AIB partner cards for the 4090, and out of all of them, if I had to choose one, I would go with the Zotac, because the Zotac was the only one that was actually at MSRP. And the FE is extremely hard to get because, at least in North America, it's a Best Buy exclusive. There's no way to get one off of Newegg. There's no way to get one from Micro Center. So you're literally stuck having to typically end up with like an AIB card. You have a Zotac 30 series and it's fine. Yeah, see, like I've said this on stream. Like when we were talking about NVIDIA cards, because I know this is an AMD Radeon topic tonight, so I'm not really going to talk too much more about GeForce. But if I was going to, I said this multiple times, if I was going to buy an NVIDIA custom AIB graphics card, I would go with Zotac. And I said this when we were talking about EVGA leaving the GPU market. I said because EVGA is no longer a choice, now my top choice is Zotac. So that's who I would go with, and they're PC partner. And the reason why I would go with them is because I knew that they made the AMD reference cards, and honestly, the AMD reference cards are pretty solid. Like in terms of the VRMs that they use, the type of capacitors, the inductors that they use on the AMD reference cards, they have always been rock solid boards. If you guys don't believe me, go look at BuildZoid's analysis videos of any of the AMD reference cards from the last several generations, and you'll see that they're actually very good. I'll give you guys another example. The RX 480, and the RX 580, those actual reference designs, even though those cards were very, very cheap, we're talking like a $250, $230 reference card with 8 gigabytes of memory. Those cards were very, very well made. And I'm talking about the reference cards, and they're made by PC Partner. So I always knew in my mind, PC Partner is very good when it comes to making like the actual board, the VRM, all that stuff. They're very, very good. And because I knew that from the AMD cards, I figured, okay, so if I'm going to get an NVIDIA card, I'm just going to go with Zotac, because Zotac is basically the same company that made the AMD reference cards. So in my mind, you can't really go wrong choosing Zotac. So you agree, NVIDIA, Zotac? I might also go PNY. So you bring up a really good point mentioning PNY. PNY, a lot of people don't know this, but PNY is the exclusive seller of all the NVIDIA professional workstation graphics cards. So what used to be called the Quadros, those are all made by PNY. And now that's another thing that's less known. That's kind of like how you guys didn't know that Zotac and PC Partner were the same thing. So PNY, Paris, New York, those are the guys that make the Quadros. Now they're just called like the RTX A whatever, if it's Ampere, like an A40 or an A3000. Those cards, those are all PNY. Now they don't say PNY on the box, but they're made by PNY. So PNY is also a really solid choice. And I've said this on another stream, and I'll say it again. If I'm going to buy a graphics card, regardless of whether it's NVIDIA or AMD, I tend to prefer one of the, and if it's going to be a partner brand, I tend to choose a partner that is exclusive to NVIDIA or exclusive to AMD. So that's why I'll support Zotac, because the Zotac brand is an NVIDIA brand. And I will not support Asus, MSI, and Gigabyte, because I don't like how those guys get to play both sides, and everyone else is forced to be one or the other. So Sapphire is exclusive to Radeon, EVGA was exclusive to NVIDIA or GeForce, PNY is exclusive to GeForce, XFX used to be GeForce, but now they're Radeon, and then Power Color is Radeon. So that's the reason why you'll never see me do a showcase of like an Asus card, unless Asus, MSI, or Gigabyte want to sample me a card. Like if they want to send me a card for review, I'm more than happy to totally do that. And I'm not going to be biased, because I'll evaluate the card as it is, right? But I'm just saying, like, if it's my own money, I'm going to favor one of the exclusive brands. And the reason why I say that is because historically, if you look at the actual, like, I'll just use Gamers Nexus teardown videos as an example. When you look at an AIB card that is exclusive to a particular brand, so in this case, let's take Sapphire as an example. Sapphire only makes Radeon. What that means is that Sapphire's engineers, when they go to design the actual cooler, they custom tailor that cooler to the characteristics, both the voltage, the thermal, the power draw, etc. They tailor-made their heat sinks to fit and incorporate the behavior of that GPU. That is the reason why I prefer an exclusive brand. Because what I have found with Asus, MSI, and Gigabyte is they take the lazy approach. Usually what they do, they're well known for doing this. They'll design a card for NVIDIA because NVIDIA is the market leader. You know, they have the majority share. Asus will manufacture a card designed based off of GeForce specifications, GeForce power draw characteristics, their voltage tuning characteristics. They'll build their cooler based off of a GeForce card. And then when it comes time to sell a Radeon card, all Asus will do is basically cut corners, copy paste that cooler, and just drop it right on top of the Radeon GPU, the die, and just call it a day. And they'll just sell it as a Radeon card. Now, I don't like that because historically, and there is evidence showing this in previous generations, where, you know, someone would do a teardown video on an Asus card, and lo and behold, some of the heat pipes on the Asus cooler don't even touch the Radeon GPU. So if you had like 4 heat pipes, you might only have 2.5 of those heat pipes touching the Radeon die, and the other 1.5 of them aren't doing anything. They're just there. So that's the reason why I don't prefer those brands. And think about it like this. If AMD was the market leader, they would just do the same thing. They would design the card for Radeon, and then NVIDIA would just be SOL. And it's like, whatever, you know, here we go. Just stack this on the NVIDIA card and just throw it out there in the market. So that's the reason why I don't like those 3 brands. So that's why you won't see me typically covering Gigabyte graphics cards or MSI graphics cards or Asus graphics cards. The only way I would do that is if, you know, they wanted to sample me a card or something. And I'd evaluate them objectively. It's not like I'm going to say, oh, don't buy this card because they're not GeForce exclusive or they're not Radeon exclusive. No, I won't do that. But I'm just saying, like, I tend to favor the exclusive brands because I know that those guys put a lot of time and effort into tailor-making their coolers for those specific branded GPUs. So in the case of Sapphire, XFX, and Power Color, I tend to support those 3 more than, you know, Asus, Gigabyte, MSI. And then on the NVIDIA side, I'll support PNY, Zotac, Galax, Palette, more so than, you know, the run-of-the-mill, the big 3, we'll say. So that's kind of my opinion on how I prioritize, like, GPU upgrade cycles. So, like, unless I had no other choice, like, for some reason, like, you know, if my region didn't have any exclusive GeForce card and say MSI and Gigabyte were the only ones that were selling, then I'd probably have to choose one of those. So that's kind of how that works. But in terms of AMD partners, the largest one is Sapphire. Sapphire is the biggest. And second biggest, a lot of people don't know this either, although it's kind of easy to make an educated guess. The second largest Radeon partner is Asus by volume. A lot of people might think Power Color, but no. It's actually Asus. Sapphire and Asus are the 2 biggest Radeon partners globally. This is well known. It goes far back, you know, at least 6 or 7 years. And then one of the reasons, like, one of the ways to know this, you had to have been following graphics cards for a long time. But if you guys remember the Fury GPU, so the card that competed with the GTX 980 Ti, so the Fury X was a liquid-cooled, made by AMD design, but the cut-down variant, the Fury, there were only 2 brands to choose from for that card. And you guessed it, those 2 brands were Sapphire and Asus. They were the only 2. Way later on, like a year later, after anyone who was actually going to buy a Fury got one, XFX finally, like, somehow got some of the dies to make their own, but literally all XFX did was take the AMD Reference card, and they just put a 3-fan style cooler, very similar to the Sapphire one, on it. So you could get an XFX branded R9 Fury. But that was basically the extent of that. Asus and Sapphire were the only two that actually manufactured the vast majority, or I guess they actually sold the majority of the R9 Fury cards. And that's because they were the biggest ones globally. XFX is more regional based. I don't think XFX is in every single like continent. Power Color, I'm not sure. Power Color is interesting because Power Color, just like Zotac, Power Color has another name. Like, Power Color to us is basically like the Zotac name. They are also known as another name, like a secret name, known in China. They're known as TUL. TUL is actually Power Color. Or I guess Power Color, I should say, is TUL. TUL Corporation, you can look them up. But they're the real name of Power Color. See, I never had an XFX card from the GeForce days. No, I think Colorful is a different one. Colorful. One of them is a German, I think German-owned Radeon brand. I can't remember exactly, but no, Colorful and Power Color are completely different. They're not related at all. There's also, so if you guys want to like go deeper in this, like there's actually a lot of AMD brands. So we didn't even talk about MSI. MSI is one. Diamond is another one. HIS is another one. I used to always say that one. I always used to call this one his high tech. His high tech. Or something like that. HIS. HIS is another one. Diamond is another one. And then in the North America, there's also Vision Tech. That's another one. AMD has, like, for some reason they have so many of these tiny little board partners that you almost never hear about anymore. But yeah, these guys have been around. Obviously, MSI is a big one, but you know these guys are also AMD Radeon exclusive partners, and you almost never hear of these anymore. Like, I know Vision Tech is still around. I haven't seen any Diamonds for a while, and I have definitely not seen any HIS for a long time. Because NVIDIA also has theirs too, like Palette, Galax, and then there's some other ones. There's that other one that I always forget. Colorful is another one, but there's another one that I can't think of right now on the NVIDIA side. Because there's PNY, there's Zotac. Oh, ASRock is an AMD one, yeah. ASRock is kind of new though. Like, ASRock only started making AMD cards during, was it like during the 57 XT, or was it the 6000 series? I can't remember. ASRock is kind of new. They haven't been making AMD cards for a long time. And then they also started making Intel graphics cards recently. So they're kind of new to the GPU world. But I don't remember like when they started. I want to say it was the 5000 series. I think it was during like the 5600, 5700 XT. Like that was probably when they started, because I know it was after Radeon 7, because Radeon 7 was like the last Vega card, and then they went to RDNA 1 with the 5700. All right, I'm gonna remove these so that their identities are kept a secret. But I think that's pretty much it. Let me go back now to the Newegg page just to kind of see. So, see, like, okay, XFX, Speedster, Merc. Oh, these are the XT. Are these all XT? Yeah, these are XT. I've had a couple of MSI. There was a time where I did have quite a number of MSI cards. So let me see if I can show these cards. So MSI GTX 970 100 ME edition. Does that show up? I have this card. I still have it. So this is my MSI. This is my only MSI GeForce graphics card. It's the rare green 100 million edition GTX 970. I still have it. Was it the green one like this, or was it the plain red one? Because the green one was the rare one. This is the rare 100 million edition. Because this is the one. This is the one that I think will sell on eBay as a collector's item. Yeah, the white one, as long as it's not the red one, because the red one I think is the generic one. But see, limited edition. This is the limited edition 100 million edition. So this is my GTX 970. That's the same one your parents had. Oh yeah. I think we talked about that, Joel. Yeah, that's the one I've got. I still have it. It's like in the box. Yeah, I've been meaning to do that video of my GPU collection. I have to dig out like a bunch of boxes from the attic, and that's gonna be a real hassle. But yeah, it's still around somewhere. You know, so I have that, and then I have the R9 Fury Tri-X. This one, I think. It's a Sapphire. I think we talked about this one. I said how Sapphire was the first. Sapphire was the first to innovate with the flow-through design. So a lot of people give NVIDIA credit for this, which is actually incorrect because it was Sapphire was the first one. Because this is a graphics card from 2015. And RTX 30 series, was 2020. So this is like 5 years earlier with that flow-through design, where they had that third fan basically push the air straight up through the fin stack. So I've got one of these. This was the card that I replaced the GTX 970 with, because this was a 2015 graphics card. I remember buying this graphics card to play. What was the game? I can't remember the game. There was a specific game that I upgraded because the 970 just wasn't cutting it with its 3.5 gigabytes of VRAM. Sapphire gets no respect from NVIDIA people. That's because they don't know who Sapphire is. Like, I've said this on stream. I'll say it again. Like, I consider Sapphire the Toyota. I say that because it's like, oh, it equates quality or whatever. But just as an analogy, I consider Sapphire the Toyota brand of graphics cards because these never die. Like, these, for some reason, just last. They're so well built. And I've said it before on a previous stream, but just if you don't want to take my word for it, go watch Steve from Gamers Nexus do the teardown on the Sapphire Pure RX 6950 XT that he did earlier, back in like April or May of 2022. Because he said it was really good, and you can take his word. If you don't want to believe me, go watch that video, and then you'll believe me. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say. So. Yeah, Nitro is really, really good. Well, I mean, Sapphire is really, really good. So, yeah, I've got one of these. I'm trying to think, what was the oldest card? So, I have the was it R9? No, HD 7970 gigahertz edition. Oh, wait, no. Matrix. It's an Asus. This one? It's too old. I have to go to like Tech Power Up to find it. HD 7970 Matrix Platinum. It's kind of weird that AMD has gone full circle and we're back to like 7000 series AMD cards again. This I think is the oldest graphics card. No, I think I still have some older ones in a box somewhere. But this is the very first flagship GPU that I've ever owned. The 7970 Matrix Platinum. So you guys, I just basically bashed on Asus, but this is the only Asus graphics card that I've ever owned. So the giant Asus Matrix Platinum with its 6 display outs, 4 display ports, and dual DV. That's pretty insane, and it's a triple slot. So how graphics cards have gotten so big, but this thing is from 2012. Yeah, 2012. And it's massive for its time. It was way ahead of its time. Let's put it that way. Way ahead of its time. Triple slot in 2012. Actually, I recently did a YouTube video last year. I think around like May or something. I did like an old video. It was basically like HD 7970. Should you upgrade or something like that? It's me like evaluating this card in 2022, a 10-year-old graphics card essentially. I did the same thing. I did the Fury one. That makes me think I need to go back and do like the GTX 970. But it was basically like the 3 old AMD cards. It was this one, the granddaddy of GCN, and then I did the Fury. So that Fury card that we just talked about. This one. So there's a video on the channel with this card from last year. And then I also did Vega 64. So the Nitro Vega 64. Yeah, this one. So, wow, apparently they still sell this for some reason from some scalper somewhere. But yeah, so I've got one of these too. This is basically a triple slot, but I don't like how they only put 2 of the bracket fingers on here. But yeah, this is... I still have this card, and it's not the special edition. The special edition had the 3rd 8-pin. Mine is just like this. It only has the 2 8-pins. But yeah, so this one... So that... the Fury, and then the Vega, and then I have the 970, and then of course I have like a 1080 also, but that's the Founders Edition one. On stock settings, Sapphire hits 88C, while the GPU is mid-60s. If I raise the power limit at all, or raise clocks at all, the junction will hit 110 while the GPU stays in mid-60s. So what I would tell you is, does it ever go to 110 when it's stock? Because I think the worst case scenario that most people have seen is it goes to 110 while stock. Like all the videos that I've seen on YouTube of people demonstrating the problem, they're running it stock. Because technically overclocking is not supported. So meaning you can't overclock it and say there's a problem, because that's technically not, that's not within specifications. So if you're not hitting 110 while stock, then you're probably fine. Because if you're overclocking it, you raise the power limit. Yeah, raising the power limit, well, it's not really overclocking, but you're raising the power limit. So you're going to generate more heat. When you do that, does the fan naturally go to 2,000 plus RPM? Or I guess my other question for you is, when it's stock, what is the fan speed? Like, how fast does the fans run at the stock 0% power limit? The delta should never exceed... No, okay, now hold on a second. No, there's a little bit of... You're not understanding something here. So when we're talking about the delta, we're talking about the delta should never exceed 20 degrees Kelvin. 20 degrees Kelvin. You're talking about 20 degrees Celsius. So, but if you want to do the math, just, I guess, to oversimplify it for you, if it's 40 degrees delta in Celsius, then that's too much. 1700 RPM means there's no problem. It has to be max fans, and it has to be hitting 110 max fans and throttling. That's how you demonstrate the problem. Because if you're at stock and you're only hitting 88, to me that looks normal. And because, you know why I'm saying that? Is because when you raise the power limit, this cooler won't be able to keep up. Like when I evaluated my XT card, I realized that the card's power limited, and it's also thermal. Well, it's constrained by what the cooler can do and what the board can supply. So the dual 8 pins aren't able to give it enough power, and then also the cooler isn't going to be adequately cooling it if you're pushing it beyond the stock limits. When they say 20 degrees, they're talking about Kelvin. They're not talking about Celsius. Celsius would be more like 40 degrees. So let's bring up Paint again to kind of like explain some of this stuff here. So first of all, I'll tell you, it needs to be in the horizontally mounted in the case to recreate the problem. You shouldn't be testing it where it's vertically mounted. It needs to be horizontally mounted. And then the other thing is, you said, okay, so I'll just put the scale out. So it's 20 degree delta in Kelvin. It needs to be that. First of all, it's not Celsius, it's Kelvin. Otherwise, 40 degree delta in Celsius. I can't spell. With power limit set to stock, it will still shoot up to 1. So that's full stock? What's the fan speed? Is the fan exceeding 1700? Because here's the conditions that I have seen. This is what I personally don't have a card, so I can't say that, but what I've seen on YouTube videos of people demonstrating the problem, it needs to be in the horizontal configuration. The hotspot is 110C. Fan RPM is around 2400 RPM. I think that's the maximum, which I think is 100% speed. Fans will hit 3,000. Oh, they go that high? Okay, that's max fan speed. And this is completely stock without raising the power limit. That sounds like it's affected then. Yeah, I don't know what, I forget what the maximum, I think it's like 27 something is the 100% fan speed. I don't think those fans can go to 3,000. I think they go to like, they get close to 3,000 though. Like maybe 28 something. Man, that sounds like Radeon 7. That sounds like my old Radeon 7. This makes me wonder if my Radeon 7 had a faulty vapor chamber from Cooler Master. Because my Radeon 7 would go to 110 Celsius, and it was around 2,900 RPM. I did not like that graphics card because it was so loud. That's the loudest graphics card I've ever owned, and that's how it behaved at stock. So that makes me wonder, like, has Cooler Master been making like faulty vapor chambers for longer than now? Yeah, that sounds like, yeah, that's the problem. That sounds like the problem. 110C at 100% fan speed, and it will lower down to like 2.3 something, right? Yeah, unfortunately, that sounds like the problem. Man, that makes me worry that this issue is actually more widespread than originally thought. But we've kind of explained why it happens. Clocks will drop below 2,000. Okay, yeah, then that's definitely the problem. Are you playing with more than one monitor, or are you using just one monitor? Although, honestly, that shouldn't matter. Okay, one more question for you. We'll drop down. Yeah, it's thermal throttling. I got one more question. How long ago did you buy the graphics card? I guess what day did you buy the graphics card? Because I want to check something here to try to trace the batch. Did you get it at launch? Or I guess what was the day that you purchased it? I hope it wasn't like really, really recent. Like meaning like earlier this week. That's really scary if that's the case. Because just like we talked about the NVIDIA cable problem, I figured I wanted to do a stream topic about this problem. Because I honestly think this problem is a more serious problem. Now, this is more of a inconvenience to the customer or the owner of the graphics cards. But this is a serious issue for AMD, PC Partner, and Cooler Master. You ordered on the 16th on Newegg. Which AIB was it? Or I guess which brand? So meaning which was it like Sapphire, Power Color, XFX? Like was it this one? Sapphire, Radeon XTX? Man, did I make the stream have too much of a delay? Because oh, Sapphire? Oh, it's this one? Oh, man. Okay. And you ordered on the 16th. So that was 3 weeks ago. Because I've seen these come in stock. I've seen these come in stock. Uh-oh. I'm a little bit concerned for reasons that will be revealed in a future video. You had to check your purchase history? So you got it on... Okay, that's 3 weeks ago, though. So that means... See, because what I'm wondering... I'm thinking the affected cards were the second, third, and fourth batches. I don't think the first batch is affected because, well, so the thing is, the reviewers. So the reviewer samples are not. I don't know what the reviewers samples are. Like, I don't know if those are a batch 0 or if they're the part of the first batch. Or are they some pre-production thing? That wouldn't make sense. Why would you send a reviewer a pre-production sample? That doesn't seem right to me. So I don't know, because none of the reviewers seem to have the problem. But I think a lot of the reviewers, a lot of the big YouTubers that were sent out cards to review, I think that they had the same, like they had the one that had the AMD box. So you'd think that it would be like the same ones that Digital River are shipping to people who buy these. Their first run off the line, not retail. Yeah, but the thing is, first run off the line are probably still the first batch. Because, remember, not all the cards are affected. So, I'm pretty sure people who got a card on launch day from Micro Center or Newegg or Best Buy or whoever, whatever, Mind Factory, anybody who was selling these on launch day, part of me thinks that whoever waited in line outside of Micro Center in the early morning or whatever, they probably are okay. Like those first day one sales figures of these cards are probably fine. I think it's like anyone who bought these like sometime after. So that would be like, well, so I don't know, because first batch. So the thing is, you said you got yours on the 16th. The card launched on the 13th. So yours was only like... See, it's hard to say for sure because I don't know how big a batch is. Like, I don't know, is a batch 3,000 units, 5,000 units, 400 units? And are they all done in one day? Because the 16th is still very, very close to launch. Your card is still one of the ones from the first week that the product was out. So what I mean by that is, if yours is in one of the earlier batches, the only difference between yours and like somebody who got theirs on launch day is yours was on a different truck to be delivered. Yeah, right. That's what I'm getting at. Like, yours is probably on the same pallet from the warehouse as the guys who managed to get theirs on the 13th. What should be the max delta from GPU temp versus junction? For normal behavior, I would say up to 20 degrees Celsius. If it goes up to like 40 degrees Celsius delta, then that's a problem. Because here, let's use Tech Power Up as an example. Let's just use Tech. I mean, I don't have one of these cards, so I can't use my own review results because I only reviewed the XT. But if we look at this one, so right here, so look at this. Here's Tech Power Up's review. For a 58 edge temp, 73 hotspot. Now you guys have to remember though, this was tested open air test bench. This is not inside a case. So what I always like to do when I see results like this, I add 15 degrees to this result to give me a more accurate representation of what you can expect in a case with low to average airflow. So I would say, add 15 to this hotspot, and that's normal. So that would put you at 88 Celsius, which I still consider totally fine. That's still normal. And then you add 15 to this, that's going to be like 70-something. So that's what I would do. Add 15 to this, because this is an open-air test bed, so this is not realistic in my mind. So that's what I would do, just plus 15 to it, and then that's kind of it. So I would say if you're able to run it, and it can go to like 90 degrees on the hotspot, but it doesn't really creep up way beyond that, then I think you're okay. But if you're definitely able to go to 110, then that's a problem. Wait, you saw it go to 122? The whole system, so the computer turned off. Okay, that means it hit an internal thermal limit, and it sent a command to Windows saying that there is an overload. There's like an overheating condition. The CPUs can do the same thing if they overheat. That means that your GPU went beyond the absolute. So when we talk about TJ max, the thermal junction max is not the temperature where the computer will turn off. The temperature where the computer will turn off is called the absolute maximum temperature, or the absolute TJ max. And that's typically with AMD, that's going to be like 120 or 115. Usually 115, but maybe 120. You've seen a higher delta than 20, but it depends on the application. Well, remember, der Bauer's delta is measured in Kelvin. So when you look at der Bauer's numbers are not the difference between this Celsius temperature and this Celsius temperature. What he's doing is he's taking those temperatures in Celsius, he's doing a mathematical conversion into Kelvin, then he's taking the difference in Kelvin. So what I'm telling you guys, if you don't want to do all the math, and you want to keep it in Celsius, for all intents and purposes, to make things easy, 40 degrees Celsius is the delta, not 20. 20 is the Kelvin delta. So to make things easy, because I know 40 is not the exact number, but to make it easy, 40 Celsius delta is the delta you want to use if you're thinking in terms of Celsius, not 20. 20 is way too small of a difference. I mean, look at this. This is already what? This is like 13, a delta of 13. So I would say add 15 to both of these to get a more realistic number for in a case. So yeah, no, it's gonna be like 40 delta. Because, like, your example earlier, what was the first example you gave me? You said, you raise the limit at all or raise the clocks at all, the junction will hit 110 while the GPU stays in the mid-60s. Well, look at that. 60 to 110, that's like 50 degree delta. You said mid-60s, so that's, that's above 40 degrees Celsius delta. And that's in line with what I was saying earlier. 40 degree delta in Celsius is basically what the problem looks like. Yeah, well, they don't scale the same. Yeah, they have a different point. No, they're not the same. I forget which one changes much slower than the other. I think Kelvin changes much slower than the other. No, they're definitely not the same. One of them has a higher dynamic range. I think Kelvin has a higher dynamic range. Or lower dynamic range, I should say. Because typically when you're dealing with chemistry, like if you're dealing with chemical composition and state changes in matter, you're usually using Kelvin to reflect those changes. You're not really using Celsius, and you're definitely not using Fahrenheit, because that's like the worst one to use. But yeah, it's so he's right when he says Kelvin, but he's using Kelvin because that's more of like a scientific. That's kind of the scientific standard when you're doing comparisons with states of matter changes. In this case, he's literally just doing delta differences, but that's still a thermal difference there. Yes, because the zero is the absolute. That's one of the reasons. But yeah, but the other thing is, like, Kelvin gives you a different kind of dynamic. I think it's dynamic range. Like, it's got a better dynamic range. I thought freezing water in Kelvin was like negative 270 or something, or 270 Kelvin or some number. I don't remember anymore. But I thought it was some. No, that doesn't make sense. But I thought that like 270. Maybe I'm thinking of liquid nitrogen. I don't know. But see, even here, even on an open test bench, like, this thing is only going to like 16 something 1600 something RPM, 1700 RPM. Yeah, so 270 is what? The boiling point of water? Is 270 Kelvin is where water boils or water freezes? I think it's where it freezes. All I know is, like, some number in Kelvin is either really, really hot or really, really cold relative to what that number means in Celsius. Just like how, for instance, 212 degrees Fahrenheit is the boiling point of water. So 212 degrees Fahrenheit is literally only 100 degrees Celsius. All I remember about Kelvin is 270. I just memorized that number is some significant number. Like, I don't know what it is. I think it's the freezing temperature of water or it's the boiling temperature of water. But I don't remember which one it actually is. 273 is the... Okay. See, okay, so I remembered something about it. I just know 270. I was like, okay, 270 is some significant number in the Kelvin scale. Because, like, the way my brain works is when I think of Fahrenheit, I think of 32 degrees because that's freezing water in Fahrenheit. And then when I think of Celsius, I think of 0 degrees because that's the freezing point of water in Celsius. And then when I think of Kelvin, I almost never use Kelvin. So it's like the only number I remember is 270 for some reason. So in my mind, I assume that must be through process of elimination. Like 270 is the freezing point of water in Kelvin because I assume that 32 Fahrenheit is what I use to think of Fahrenheit. 0 is what I think of to think of Celsius. Therefore, through reasoning, whatever, 270 is freezing in Kelvin. Okay, but it's not actually 270. I just remember, 273 or whatever. 270 is like what's stuck out in my brain. The conversion of Celsius to Kelvin is that instead of the value of 270 used. Okay. I mean, yeah, and it's because Kelvin is so exact that decimal, that 0.15, doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Because if you remove that decimal and then convert to the Celsius, it's like, it doesn't really do a whole lot for the Celsius temperature. So that's why. Okay, but I mean, I wanted to do a video about this just to kind of clarify some points, because I was reading stuff on Reddit and I could tell so many people, the average person who bought one of these has no idea like what actually goes on behind the scenes. There was some mentioning of Digital River, so that tells me that some people bought these from AMD.com because Digital River is the distributor on AMD.com. But in terms of the manufacturing side, there's 3 parties ultimately that are guilty in this, and they're all kind of to blame. But yeah, like I've seen people. It was clear to me that people were confused because like. I would read comments on Reddit and on YouTube videos of people saying, if I bought one that has a Sapphire, that came in a Sapphire box, am I affected? Or is it only people who bought one off of AMD.com? And people would say misinformation like, no, if you bought a Sapphire one, it's okay. But what they didn't clarify was if you bought a Sapphire with a custom cooler, like the Nitro, for instance, then you're not affected. Basically, if the card looks like this, if it literally looks like this card, there's a high chance or a good chance that it's affected. Doesn't matter what brand is on the box. Now, the only thing is, if someone's trying to do an RMA, what I'm not sure, depending on where they are in the world, I don't know if it, like, who exactly you contact. I assume if you have a Sapphire branded made by AMD card, you contact, okay, in this case, you would contact Newegg. But if it's like beyond the return window, you would have to contact Sapphire or whoever's actually on the box. Yeah, I would say, yeah, you need to go to Newegg. You should open a case with Newegg and basically explain the issue. I think that's what I would do, in all honesty. Because, I mean, the easiest scenario is to just return it, saying that it's not working as expected, and just get your money back. Or you can just exchange. And the thing that you'll need to check with Newegg, though, like if you want to do an exchange, like if I was in your boat, because I would actually want the card, even though it's not working, I want a working card, so I would want to do an exchange. So I want to do an RMA. But since you're within the return window, it's actually way easier for Newegg to basically send you the return, or print you the return label. You know, you'll print out the return label, and then you'll just send them back the card, and they'll just send you another one from their warehouse. Now, the biggest problem in all of this, since it's not clear to me how big the batches are, have the batches that are still in the warehouses, have those bad cards been recalled internally? Meaning, for example, if Newegg has a bunch of these cards sitting in their warehouse somewhere, has Newegg been notified by AMD or Sapphire or XFX, whoever is on the box, have they been notified to basically not sell these cards and ship them back to AMD? Now, the article from Igor's lab seems to indicate that that has already been taking place for the last several weeks. So, but I don't know if that only happened last week or this week, or if it's only happening now. I hope that it's not only happening now, but it did. But AMD did say, Scott Herkelman did say in an interview at CES that it took them about 2 weeks to isolate the problem to it being a coolant issue with the vapor chamber, and then the whole thing with Igor's lab. See, what I don't know is what was the time frame. When he says those 2 weeks, what 2 weeks? He's talking about winter break? He's talking about the week between like Christmas and New Year's? Like, what is he talking about? And then also, have the cards been like pulled from the warehouse and sent back to PC Partner? Because ultimately that's where they're going to go. You would RMA based on you hit. Yeah, you just need to RMA it. I just hope that the cards that are like popping up on Newegg occasionally for sale by Newegg are not cards that should have been shipped back to the warehouse. Because that's just going to keep this problem going longer than it needs to. I think what's going to happen for AMD is like AMD.com, I'm pretty sure there's gonna be like no made by AMD card listed for sale on AMD.com for a long time. Like they're gonna have to fulfill so many RMAs that they're just gonna have to start taking newer batches of cards that are meant to be sold on their website and just like shipping these out to the distributors, and they're gonna have to shuffle these around. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if, like, for instance, in your case, you have one that has a Sapphire box. If you RMA this to Newegg, don't be surprised if you send this back with the Sapphire branding, but then they send you a card that has the AMD official packaging, and you end up getting the one with the epic unboxing experience. Because, you know, they probably have these coming in that are meant to be sold on AMD.com, but they have to fill all these RMAs, so they're going to probably reroute some of this to Newegg and some other retailers. So, you know, don't be surprised if that happens. That's because in a scenario like this, I can totally see that happening, where, you know, you send them back your Sapphire branded, made by AMD, and then they, because they have to fulfill your RMA request, they end up sending you, you know, like one of these, like an AMD one that has an AMD box on it or with it instead of a Sapphire box. But I could be completely wrong. Like, I don't know. I feel like it's easier to do that than to just do this. Like, because otherwise, I think Newegg's gonna have a problem fulfilling RMAs Because Newegg is probably one of the largest resellers of graphics cards. So, yeah, that's going to be some tough times. So the AMD is telling you once your RMA is approved that they will let you know when they have. But see, that's only AMD, though. In your case, you're going to open a case with Newegg, and that's going to be completely different. You're going to be dealing with somebody from Newegg support, not AMD support. And AMD support is actually Digital River. So that's a whole other thing. There's different call centers. These are all going to they're going to route to different people. Like, since yours is through Newegg and you're within the return window, you would the easiest thing to do is to just deal with Newegg. The only people who should be dealing with AMD are the people who bought one from AMD.com. I honestly find this issue far more fascinating than the NVIDIA 4090 power cable issue from last year. Because the NVIDIA power cable issue, I kind of think a lot of that was user error. I don't know. Now, obviously, there was a faulty way that they manufactured it, so it ultimately was a manufacturing problem. You know, there was 2 different suppliers that made those cable adapters, and one of them didn't make them as good as the other one or something. I vaguely remember the issue. But it says you can RMA it with them or your retailer or the IBs. Really? Okay. I would still go through Newegg. I still think you'll have better luck with Newegg than AMD. Just ask Newegg, like, if Newegg approves the RMA, like, ask them what is the ETA like that they'll actually ship you a card, because maybe AMD's faster than Newegg, maybe AMD's slower than Newegg. I would assume that Newegg is faster. And the reason why Newegg is faster is because Newegg is sourcing these cards from multiple different AIB partners. Whereas AMD, like with AMD's one, you're literally relying on Digital River. It's basically one pipe. Whereas Newegg has multiple pipes. They've got Sapphire, they've got the ASRock one, the Asus one, the BioStar one, the Gigabyte one, the Power Color one. So, assuming those cards were actually sold at some point on here. So it seems to me like Newegg is the way to go in terms of getting a replacement faster. This one's gonna be slower because, you know, like, Newegg Newegg just sells more graphics cards than AMD.com. It always has. So that's why I think Newegg will be faster. Because it goes back to PC Partner at the end of the day. Like PC Partner is the one who's assembling all of these. And so, for example, just to give a rough example, let's delete these guys because they're not in this. So we'll remove these guys. So, like, let's say the batch that was made today, or is being made right now, you know, or whatever, right? Like, the cars are being manufactured now. Digital River gets 1,000 of them. Sapphire gets 2,500. XFX gets, 1,500. I'm just throwing out random numbers. Power Color gets 2,000. Asus gets 3,000. Gigabyte gets 400. Some random arbitrary numbers. So, meaning, what I mean by this is, if you go through AMD.com, you're forced to go through Digital River, which means you gotta be queued up for one of these RMA units. If you go through Newegg will get some number of these, some number of these, a portion of these, a portion of these, and a portion of these, because other sites like Amazon, Mind Factory, Overclockers UK, all the global supply is going to siphon some of these. Wait, so you're just waiting for the nitro to become available, and then you're just gonna buy that, and then but then what are you gonna do once you're outside the return window? Why don't you just, in that case, why don't you just return the card, since you're within the return window of Newegg? Just get your money back from Newegg, and then once the nitro becomes available, just buy one of those. Oh. But you are going to go through Newegg then, right? Because, see, sometimes... Well, I guess this depends on if you buy the extended warranty thing through Newegg. But you remember how EVGAs... Well, I'm not going to bring up Step Up Program. But I know that if in the past... Now, I've never bought the extended warranty through Newegg or Micro Center. But what I've heard from other people is if they bought one of those and if the card went bad, the retailer who they purchased the extended warranty from will give them a replacement card, which is of equal value to what they had. Meaning they'll have to choose something from their inventory and send that to you as a replacement. So, because I've heard stories where somebody had like a GTX 1080 go bad, and then they bought that program years ago when they purchased the card, and then what ended up happening was Newegg shipped them, because the 1080 Ti was gone, like it was a end of life product. Newegg shipped them like a 2080 or a 2080 Ti, something of equal or better value at the time that product failed. So, so in your case, like if you do it that way, I was thinking maybe they would ship you like one of these or something. I don't know. Like, I don't know how it works, because it's more of like you're doing this within a return window. So it's not like you can try to exchange this and then they're just going to say like, oh, we don't have any of these, but we do have these, so we'll just send you one of these instead. I don't know if they could do that. But again, like, I think part of that depends on if you bought that extended warranty, and most people don't do that. So in this case, I think it's either going to be a like-for-like exchange, which means it has to only be the same exact card, or it could be... Oh, man, I wasn't even showing what I've been illustrating the whole time. Basically, I was saying, like, if it's since in this case it's a RMA or a refund... If it's an RMA for an exchange, it's going to be a like for like. So it's going to be one of these. Or your money back. But what I was saying earlier, but it wasn't showing up on screen, but is sometimes if you purchase the extended warranty option from Newegg, like if this card was faulty, like in this case it's defective, you would send it back, and if they're out of stock because they're not going to supply it or something, or the lead times are too long, they would just send you like one of these instead, or maybe one of these, like a Pulse. I don't know if they'll do that, because that's not within the... I don't know. I don't think they're gonna do that. The Galaxy phones, when they sent me a better model. Yeah, that's like if you have that warranty. If you have the extra warranty, then they'll do that. Do you think the 110 temp could also be an issue with the XT? No, it's not. That's not an XT problem. Yeah, no, it's a well-known problem with the vapor chamber. I illustrated it earlier. We went in depth. We talked about the design of the vapor chamber. We talked about what happens when the pressure is too low and there's not enough fluid. Essentially what's happening is because the fluid is too low, it all turns into vapor. So all the water in the vapor chamber turns into a gas, and it just stays as a gas. And you just lose the cooling efficiency, and that's why it hits the 110 Celsius. And we explained why the problem only manifests when it's in the horizontal state, as opposed... I deleted the diagram, but I had the diagram drawn earlier. I guess if I... Oh, there we go. So yeah, like it essentially when it's vertically mounted, there's enough liquid that pools at the bottom that it's able to maintain the condensation cycle of water going to gas and then turning back to liquid and then turning back to gas, turning back to liquid. That's essentially what's happening. When there's not enough liquid and it's horizontal, the water spreads too thin across the greater surface area, meaning the depth of water. If you were to measure how much water from the bottom of the tank, it's way less than the depth of water measured when the card is vertical. So that's the reason why when it's horizontal, you see the problem manifest, because the water spreads across a greater surface area relative to the volume of the water, and then it all turns into vapor, and then you have no cycle because there's not enough water. So that's basically how the problem is occurring. Yeah, and I also have my Reference XT, and I have not seen the problem at all. It's pressured when it's being made. So if you guys notice, if you guys watch the Gerbauer video, well, I think, did the Gerbauer video show it? Yeah, he did. In one of his videos, he showed that there's one end of the vapor chamber where there's like this little like copper end piece, like almost like a pin sticking out. That is where they add the water. So when they're building it, this is actually open, and they basically hook it up to the reservoir, and that thing pushes the water in there, and it pressurizes the water to a certain, like, I don't know what the units, I forget the number of units for pressure, but then they basically seal it off. They basically weld it shut, so it's stuck there under pressure. But it maintains a certain pressure under that changes based off of temperature. I don't think it's done in a vacuum. I think it's literally just normal room temperature. Maybe. You know what? That's a good point. It might be in a light vacuum. But see, the other thing too is, I think that applies if it's just, pure deionized water, or just, if it's deionized water or something, then maybe that comes into play. But I'm thinking also, the other thing you can do with water is you can add compounds to it, like, like salts or sulfates. You can add things to the water to also alter the boiling point of the water. So it could be it could be that whatever liquid they're putting in the vapor chamber, it's water, but it's like mixed with some degree of some kind of other element, like salt, for instance, or sodium, to alter the boiling point. So they could do it that way. They could do it chemically that way as well. I mean, that's kind of how antifreeze in cars works. But either one, if they're doing it chemically or they're doing it based off of chamber pressure or vacuum pressure, it's one or the other. Vapor chamber enclosure. The vapor chamber enclosure is a vacuum-sealed envelope that houses the wick structure. And a working fluid, the wick material and liquid are added. The device is vacuum sealed. Okay, then that's probably how it's done. So that's probably the easier way, because they don't have to mix anything with the water. They're probably just using deionized water, or maybe not deionized water. They're probably using distilled water. That's what I meant to say. Because you wouldn't want to put like tap water, because tap water tends to have impurities, and that could cause the metal to degrade or something. So yeah, I don't know. PC World's second to last video. Is that the video with the interview with Scott Herkelman? Because I saw that video. Things in the water could calcify or corrode. Yeah, so the water has to have... It has to be a certain pH also. Because if the water has a higher pH, it will calcify. If it's a lower pH, it will corrode. Interview with Scott. Yeah, I saw the video. But, you know, basically, he said what I'm saying right here. Like, there wasn't enough fluid in the vapor chamber. So, poor Cooler Master. Well, I don't know. Poor AMD, because they're getting all the hate. But, you know, on the back end, we all know. Well, you guys know, not everybody, but the few people watching this actually now know, like, the true identity of the one who screwed up massively. And also the other company, the partner in crime, who didn't test horizontal mounting in the factory. Probably not. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure they would have caught this. I'm pretty sure they would have caught this issue if they were testing these at PC Partner's factory. If they were mounting these things horizontal, there's no way they could have not seen that. That's ridiculous. That's sheer negligence, or it's literally just they test it using a vertical test bed, which is realistically what they're doing. No. There's no way. They have to duplicate the problem. Part of the reason why it took the 2 weeks was because they had to duplicate the problem. So realistically, what AMD did is they probably had their engineering teams run these in the lab and find the problem within AMD, but then they had to call up PC Partner over in China and was like, hey, can you guys test some of these horizontally and vertically and let us know the results? So then those guys had to do the test because that's not their standard procedure, so that's going to incur a delay there. And, you know, so that, you know, there was that whole delay. And then once they both checked in, like, oh, yeah, I see the problem. Yeah, I see the problem too. Then they got to go and call you-know-who to, like, hey, we need you to check something here. We got a problem. So that's how it works. They wanted to close out the fourth quarter. They should be weighing the coolers to verify water content. Who would be doing that? Cooler Master? I guess Cooler Master would be doing that. So what you're mentioning, they should be weighing the coolers to verify. The thing is, it could be such a small amount that it could be such a small amount that it may not even show up as a significant difference. That's what I'm thinking, because that thing is kind of small. It's not like it's that big. Yeah, it's a pretty large vapor chamber, but in terms of the overall weight, because you got to think too, like the tolerance, I guess the variance in the weight of just the aluminum and the copper itself is probably going to be more substantial than the difference in how much the water makes. Yeah, it's going to be so small that it's going to be... No, well, not grams, but you guys get what I'm saying. Like milligrams or something. I'm pretty sure they weigh these things. It's not like they don't weigh them. I think it was just so insignificant in terms of the weight difference that Cooler Master never caught it. That's totally on Cooler Master because they're the ones who weigh them. Because they literally just make it and they ship them out to PC Partner, and then because remember, PC Partner like has just-in-time manufacturing. In fact, let me find it. Okay, hold up. Let's look at this here. Wait, PC. Why am I not able to reach this website? Okay. So let's do this then. PC partner. Let's check this out here. Okay, let's take a look. Let's see how they build these things. Why is this only 360p? There we go. Turn that down. That's like really loud. Alright, look. They're manufacturing graphics cards. VGA production line. That's aka graphics card production line. Oh man, I feel like I'm throwing these guys under the bus. You know, there was a way to make sure they work, otherwise... So, but see, it's not on these guys to measure that. They're not going to measure the vapor chambers. That's on Cooler Master. Cooler Master measures the vapor chambers. What I'm saying is that it's probably such a slight difference in weight that nobody caught it. It was probably within a tolerance in terms of the amount of weight of the actual metal instead of the liquid. Let's see. So let's see. I want to see if it shows them test the card. Like, I want to see if they're horizontally mounting these cards. Those are like some low-end Zotac cards. When was this video made? Well, I don't know, but... Okay, oh, hold on. Go back. Check this out. Look. Vertical mounting test bed. Vertical mounting test bed. Check it out. She's vertically mounting the test. She never tested these horizontal. Vertical mount. Man, I'm not trying to throw a PC partner under the bus, so I hope they don't get mad at me. But I'm just saying, like, this is a big deal now, because now you see how this slipped through the QA, because they literally plug them in vertical and run 3D Mark or Furmark or whatever they run, and they're like, okay, it's good, we're good. Oh, check it out, Zotac. I was right. I said it. I said they were Zotac in disguise. Alright, well, there you go. Now we know that they tested them vertical, because that's their standard procedure, and usually that's fine if everything works. So, do they fill the vapor chamber? Wait, hold up. There's more test beds here. Oh, these are testing, like, motherboards. They're testing a bunch of, like, yeah, so this is, like, transient load, whatever. They're looking at transient load. Oh, this is pretty cool. I didn't know they actually did this. They actually do acoustic noise test and EMI. Well, I know they do EMI, but I didn't know they did acoustic testing. That's interesting. Do they fill the vapor chamber before they fuse it with the heatsink? The heatsink is part of the vapor chamber. So I guess to answer your question, I think the answer is yes. I think they fill it first, seal it off, and then if they're going to, well, I really think that the heatsink is part of the vapor chamber. So, because if you remember when Steve did the teardown, but you can also kind of see it from DeBauer's video. It's all one big piece. It's literally aluminum heatsink or a fin stack with a hollow chamber underneath. Oh. Oh, yeah, well, but see, the thing is, don't they have to weld them together? Because it's all one big piece. it has to transfer. So the temperature from the water, the heat from the water has to flow. It has to transfer to the metal. It has to transfer over into the aluminum fin stack. Unless that entire thing is copper, which I doubt, because that would be very heavy. I don't know. That would be a question for Cooler Master. The question of whether or not it is filled before or after they fuse it to the aluminum fin stack, that's a question for Cooler Master. But so basically, bottom line is multiple parties screwed up here. PC Partner didn't test the thing horizontal in the factory, and Cooler Master just screwed up just royally with the vapor chamber not having enough fluid. That's all there is to it. You bring up a good question. Some of them, so as far as I know, let's go back to Newegg here. So not all of them use vapor chambers. That's correct. So the AMD cards, both of them, the XTX and the XT, both use vapor chambers. Now so if we're talking AIB, the Sapphire Nitro, this uses a vapor chamber. This definitely has a vapor chamber. Hence the name Vapor X. On the box, somewhere on the box. Or maybe they're not using the box. Well, I know for a fact they're using a vapor chamber. It should say somewhere. It's somewhere in there. It's a vapor chamber. This one has a vapor chamber. Now, obviously, it's different from the one that the AMD reference card uses. Now, the Pulse, this probably does not use a vapor chamber. I don't think this one uses one, but I could be wrong. I have no idea. I know nothing about this card. I didn't know that. But this one I know for a fact has a vapor chamber. The Red Devil that I have, this one, contrary to popular belief, this one does not feature a vapor chamber. There is no vapor chamber on the Red Devil. The Red Devil is literally direct contact heat pipe design. So no vapor chamber on the Power Color Red Devil. I think the Hellhound from Power Color also doesn't use a vapor chamber. Where is the Asus Tough? Wherever that is. Okay, the Hellhound, this does not use a vapor chamber. I think this is, again, just like Red Devil. It's like a direct heat pipe. Now, Asus Tough, also, I don't know why it's not listed. Asus Tough does not have a vapor chamber. This goes back to what I was saying earlier, where Asus kind of cheaps out when it comes to Radeon designs. Notice how Asus... So the Strix on the 4090... This one from Asus, this has a vapor chamber. But for some reason, Asus has not yet released a Strix version of the 7900 XTX. So, which doesn't make any sense considering they released a 4070 Ti Strix. Why the 4070 Ti needs a massive Strix cooler, I don't understand that. But for some reason, they'll release a 4070 Strix, and they'll sell it for $1,100, but they won't sell a 7900 XTX Strix Edition. Instead, they opt to sell the Tough, which is the lower end version of their cooler, which does not use a vapor chamber. And then ASRock, I don't know anything about the ASRock cards. So the Tai Chi, this probably has a vapor chamber. And then the Phantom may or may not. I don't know. Probably one of them has one and the other one doesn't. That would be my guess. Whichever one's supposed to be more premium has one, and whichever one's more budget doesn't have one. I don't know. I don't know much about ASRock. So I can't really comment too much on that one. 4070 Ti doesn't even need close to that. I know. That's what I was thinking. I was like, do they not understand what this card is? It's almost like they don't really care about the 4070 Ti, and rather than trying to size an appropriate cooler for it, they literally just copy pasted whatever cooler they had on the 4080 and just threw it on that thing and called it a day. Hence, going back to what I was saying earlier about how Asus literally just copy pastes coolers from their NVIDIA GPUs and throws them on their Radeon ones, and then wonders why the Radeon ones have the wrong noise characteristics. Yeah, the XT, the non-X, well, okay, the XT, actually, is there an Asus stuff of this one? There's a Nitro of this one. Yeah, I like the size of it. I like how it's relatively compact, and it's only like 1,500 grams. So it's not to the point where it's so heavy that you need a support bracket, and it's also relatively small, so you don't have to worry about it sagging. You don't have to worry about it taking up so much space. You don't have to worry about it covering up all your PCIe slots. So that's the nice thing about it. Where's the tough? I know I saw it on here. Well, okay, Asus doesn't want to... Oh, we'll have to go to Tech Power Up. Because I know Tech Power Up reviewed a whole bunch of them. Like, what did they do for the 4070 Ti? They didn't do it, but I know Micro Center has... 40, like, watch. Check this out. Look at this. This is ridiculous. Why does a 4070 need this? Look, Asus. Real talk. Why isn't this cooler on your 7900 XTX? Why are you throwing this on a 4070 Ti and then charging $1,050 for a 4070 Ti? Like, this is the most like ridiculous nonsense I've seen. Zotac. Okay, look. Okay, well that's still overpriced. Like, what is this? Come on, PC partner. What are you doing? Oh man, these prices. I'm pretty sure people are buying this. It's kind of disgusting when you think about it. That's disgusting. Disgusting. A 70 tier card over $1,000. Like, oh man, that's gross. Anyway, yeah. So where is the tough? Okay, apparently none of the US retailers have the tough. I guess the only way to find it is they did a review on it. There's the Nitro. Here's the Merc. And then there's that one. Here's the tough. We'll go here. So let's find the tough. The tough does not feature a vapor chamber. And let's look at the teardown. That's really heavy though. Wow, that's heavy. This is either the heaviest or the second heaviest one. Right here. See? No vapor chamber. Wait, why is everybody all of a sudden talking about a 4080? We're talking about a 4070. MSI Supreme. What's going on? Well, there's like all this. They use a vapor chamber and heat pipes on the Nitro. Yeah, the 4070 doesn't need that giant cool. It's actually nice to keep the reference. Heat pipes are just vapor chambers in a different shape. Yeah, they're basically a flattened heat pipe. Supreme. 100%. What? Asus has not started selling yet. Really? Is streaming plus gaming on the ARC decent? I mean, I did it. It was good. I hope no one buys that for real. They will buy it. Depends on the game. Okay, Supreme for the win. I don't know about that, dude. I have the Founders Edition 4080 for 1200. The XT beats the crap out of that card in raster. Yeah, it does. Does it use QuickSync in OES? Yes, it does, Marcus. 4080 is good. 3 gig. Okay, since you're talking about Arc, I'll let you know. Arc is good. Arc is totally good. Like, the only thing about Arc, if you want to get a really good deal on a mid-range GPU, get one of these. It's so good value. 16 gigabytes at this price point is unbeatable. Unbeatable. Now, the only thing that I'll nitpick Intel, I've said this multiple times, I'll say it again, they currently don't have a proper control panel for their driver. So, like, when you right-click on your desktop and you open the Intel control panel, it'll open like an overlay on your monitor. And it's terrible if you have 3 monitors like me, because sometimes it'll occasionally put the overlay with the buttons on the leftmost monitor, and when you go click on it, it's offset for some reason, so it disappears, and it's like you're always having to try to fish an invisible area on your monitor to figure out where the buttons are. So I haven't revisited Arc because of not issues with games, but issues with the actual UI, like the user experience with customize, like configuring things in the control panel is just so half-baked right now that yeah, that's why. But if you're only using one monitor, or if you're someone who literally just wants to install the GPU and never touch the control panel and run it fully stock, then it's actually a really good product for what it is, for the price point. And the question for OBS streaming with Arc, you're going to be able to utilize the same things you get with the AMD streaming. So you're going to get H.264, H.265, and you get you get QuickSync H.264, I think. It's been a while since I used it, but you get like a couple of different choices in there. 40. I guess it will stay cool. Probably good for people who want to get the best scores for the GPU. I'm not sure which GPU you were talking about. I haven't streamed with the Intel Arc other than on Discord. It's bad. I have streamed with Intel. I will do another one in the future using the gaming PC. It's just because I've been waiting for Intel. I've been hoping that Intel will release a massive update that will overhaul how they do their UI. But I haven't seen that from them yet. And that's why I'm just kind of like letting that card sit in the box. They went to a really good... It's actually 5 nanometer. Yet the heatsinks got huge. Makes no sense. Because it's a 300 watt GPU. What do you expect? And the other two are even higher. It also comes with a free copy of the new... Yeah. Yes, right here. I think. Right here. You got one game. Pick 3 of 5 creative. Why did it go to an Intel webpage? Somewhere in here. I don't know why it's showing me all this stuff. But it... Yeah. Right here. Yeah, right there. This is what you get. Intel gift. Right here. You get Modern Warfare 2 on Battle.net with purchase of qualifying Arc. There you go. I don't know why that says $255 because that game is definitely not $255. Oh, because it comes with this other stuff. What did it say? You get pick 3 of 5 creative... Oh, wait, what? Power Director, if you use that, I guess that's cool. Or D5 Render. Oh, these are subscription-based. So, I don't know. XSplit Premium, that's actually pretty good. But is that a subscription or is that a one-time license? Because I think if this is literally... If that is a permanent license... This is like the vast majority of this price is literally just this and the game. Yeah. Because what I have found, because you guys notice I stream, so I use XSplit and OBS. But the thing about XSplit is better if you're doing things more for like sharing a screen. Like what I'm doing here, where I show you guys my browser, and then I'll occasionally show Paint if I want to illustrate something. XSplit is actually better than OBS when it comes to that sort of thing, because the problem with OBS is you have to use so many source submenus, you have to keep changing sources, or have multiple window captures which eat up memory. That can become problematic. And the other thing I don't like about OBS is if you change the source, it will like default the size of it for some reason, and I have to keep dragging it across the screen. So it looks very unprofessional. Whereas XSplit, it's very easy to just add like an application window capture or something just on the fly, and it just automatically sizes it properly. I don't know why OBS can't do that. But yeah, for streaming, like, they both are the same. But I will say that OBS is ahead of XSplit when it comes to streaming with the GPU, because OBS has HEVC. If you're on Arc, it has the quick sync. If you're doing recording with NVIDIA, or like if you're using RTX 40 series or the new AMD Radeon 7000 series or the Intel Arc, you also do have AV1 encoding with the latest OBS beta, where you don't have that with XSplit. Now with XSplit, you do, interestingly enough, just on the topic of this real quick and then we'll move on. XSplit is the most... XSplit and Intel Arc is actually the best pair. OBS is a little bit more behind with integrating Arc. I feel like OBS is definitely, like, the devs who work on OBS are definitely partnering up with NVIDIA and AMD way more than Intel, whereas Intel and XSplit have partnered up and are working together, hence the reason why XSplit Premium is showing up in this Intel gift bundle. And it makes sense because if you guys go back and watch last year when Intel was touting AV1 encoding, the example they used was Elden Ring being encoded using AV1, and the application that they were using was XSplit. So that's the reason, there's your answer there, why XSplit is actually better to pair Intel Arc with over OBS. But it's not to say that OBS is bad. OBS, if you're going to use OBS with Arc, I think you're only going to do H.264 and H.265. I don't know if you can do quick sync with OBS, but I know you can with XSplit, and I know all the AV1 options are in XSplit for local record. They are not there in OBS when I last checked. So I guess I should have done a video on that. But I know that not everybody uses XSplit. I know quite a few people use OBS, but I feel like an even smaller group of people use XSplit. So I felt like, if I make a video with XSplit and Intel Arc, is this going to be really relevant? I mean, maybe I'll go back and make that video. But bottom line, the TLDR is, if you get Intel Arc, definitely try out the XSplit Premium Suite, because you do get the full access to AV1. The quick sync options are there. And the thing with XSplit is you can choose quick sync H.264, quick sync H.265, or you could literally just do AV1, and there's also like this other one that was like local record X or H.264 and H.265. There were like there was like 5 or 6 different options with XSplit, whereas OBS literally had 2 options, if I remember correctly. It was H.264 and H.265. There was no AV1, at least when I last tested OBS with the Arc GPU. I don't know if that's changed recently. But yeah, this is the best value you can get. If you're even considering Arc, I'm just gonna go ahead and say, like, get this. Do not get any of the terrible value RTX 30 series cards at this price point. They're not worth it. The fact that this is bundling all this creative director stuff, whatever, that's like already an extra value alone. And the only other option that's comparable to this would be like the 6600 XT or the 6650 XT from AMD, but I don't think those have the same benefits in terms of... Oh, okay, you get 2 games. That's right. And actually, these are on really good fire sale right now. So this is actually cheaper than the Intel card, but it's also faster than the Intel card in rasterization. And this one does give you, I think, Dead Island. Yeah, so with this, you get Dead Island 2, which comes out in April, and you get the Callisto Protocol, which is out now. So that's kind of the incentive there. So both AMD and Intel, bottom line is both AMD and Intel have way better bundles and value for money in the mid-range versus NVIDIA, which literally has nothing. They're trying to sell you overpriced graphics cards like the RTX 3060 Ti, which is still above MSRP. Now, granted, this Zotac one is $20 above MSRP. Oh, wait, there's a $20 promo. Okay, so you can get it. Well, you can get it at MSRP. You can get a Zotac with the promo code, makes it actually MSRP. And, oh, wait, what's this? They finally added a bundle. Okay, so they finally added a game. Get Marvel Midnight Suns. This was not available last year. So they finally added something, some sort of incentive. I guess they looked at AMD and Intel and was like, these guys have actual bundles. We might need to do something here. But the thing is, it's still not good value because it's like this one game. And then compared to the other two, AMD's giving you 2 games. And I think Callisto Protocol is probably one of the better games to come out in terms of graphical quality compared to this. And then the other thing is Intel's giving you like way more than both of them. So in terms of value, this is basically garbage compared to Intel because it's like 8 gigabytes of memory versus 16. And it's only at $400 with the promo code, which is terrible value because that is the MSRP of this card. And this is, and it's 2 years old. So, hello, that's not good value. So there you go. Yeah, Intel Arc. My vote's for Intel Arc. And if you want something faster, get a 6700 XT. Or better yet, a 6750 XT if they're still around. Oh, but these are, well, okay, never mind. Because these are kind of more expensive. So maybe the 6700 XT. Okay, that's more what I thought. So this is actually pretty good still. Because this is faster than 3060 Ti. It's 12 gigabytes of memory, and you're still getting the 2 free games. So the choices are, if you're looking for mid-range, the choices are either 6650 XT, Intel Arc A770, or 750 if you want to like pay less than $300. And then the 6700 XT, or maybe the 6750 XT. 6750 XT is more like 3070 Ti sort of territory though. So it's going to be more pricier, but it's going to perform better, I guess. So that's kind of my opinion on that. Oh, the 10 gigabyte. Yeah, I always forget about that one. That's a mining card. This card was literally made for mining. It doesn't even show up on the website. So I like, oh, nope, that's still, I don't understand what's up with these prices. But yeah, if you can find the 10 gigabyte, that's still good value, but I don't know about that. I would still push somebody to the 6700 XT. The 6700 10 gigabyte is basically a PS5 for those wondering. Yeah, but yeah, I get what you're saying, Joel. The non-XT is pretty much identical to Intel Arc in terms of the rasterization performance. So, but those are basically non-existent anymore. I mean, I don't see any of them on Newegg, and Newegg is usually the most accurate source to see if these cards are still around. Like, obviously, these are not around anymore. With those kind of prices, I don't know why these even list at these prices, and who would actually buy these at these prices. There, that's more like it. Like these, I don't know what's going on with Gigabyte. I don't know why, but every time I've looked at Gigabyte Radeon cards on Newegg, they've never been the correct price. I don't know why there's 2 MSI cards that are identical that have massively different price points, and they're both sold by Newegg. Somebody at Newegg probably needs to double check what they've listed here. But yeah, anything like this one, this triple fan is going to be super quiet. This is basically like how Asus stuck a Strix cooler on a 4070 Ti. Here they stuck like a 6800 cooler on a 6700 and called it a day. Okay, yeah, I see it. It's an Amazon link. $349. That's identical price to that's the same exact price for the ARC GPU. So yeah, that's very close. But see, like this is like what? $10 more for the Oh no, this is it. This is it. There it is. 10 gigabytes right there. I didn't even realize that. So yeah, the Amazon one is $10 less. No, yeah, I saw it. But you know, I probably need to check the mid-range more often. I feel like the mid-range is really where all the value is. So people are complaining so much on Reddit and YouTube about how the price of GPUs are so sky high. I mean, yeah, of course the new stuff is, but there's really good deals. I mean, Intel's a really good deal right now, and the Radeon cards are on a really good deal too. So it's just, I don't know. I feel like Nvidia is literally just selling on brand recognition alone at this point, because these prices are so much better for what you get compared to what you get with the GeForce stuff. It's kind of ridiculous. You heard they just released new drivers? Wait, you can get an ASRock? Oh, you're in Australia? Oh, I mean, yeah. Australia is pretty tough. That's a really tough market right now. This one. Variable refresh and frame capping works well. So the thing is, I'll say this, like, my review from my own testing, because I did a review. I did a review back when ARC came out. The thing that I'll say about the review, just to kind of summarize it, if you didn't watch it, but essentially what I concluded in testing this GPU, well, I didn't test the A750. I tested the A770, but the A770 is a very good choice for 1440p for most titles. Now, for titles that are brand new, like for example, A Plague Tale Requiem, which I don't have, so I wasn't able to test it. But those newer type of games that really push the envelope on rasterization, the ARC might require you to drop some graphics settings, but generally at 1440p, the A770 did really well. And I can only imagine the A750 will do very similar. So at 1440p, it'll be fine with 8 gigabytes of memory in most cases. But if you're on a 1080p monitor, the A750 is still really good value. I mean, under 300, if you can get one for under 300 in Australia, then yeah, then this would be good. Especially for 1080p. 1080p, like, this is still very good. ARC is a good architecture for RT. So that's another good question. So I tested the rasterization, I tested the ray tracing. It is somewhat, it's strange. It's better than RTX 20 series. It's definitely better than NVIDIA's first generation. And it's somewhat better than AMD's first generation, which is like the 6000 series. In games where the ray tracing is heavier, it favors more on the path tracing approach. Like, for example, Quake 2 RTX, and I guess Minecraft RTX would be another example, but I didn't test that game. It does outperform AMD's RNA 2 by a noticeable margin. But for games like Resident Evil, Far Cry 6, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, were games where the ray tracing wasn't so path traced heavy, or they only did ray tracing shadows, or the global illumination wasn't as heavy, then it's kind of the same as like the 6700 or maybe the 6800 XT. It kind of depends on the title. That's kind of what my conclusion was at 1080p and 1440p. But, you know, at 4K, like, I don't consider either of the ARC GPUs 4K capable or even 4K ready. Like, you can do 4K, but you're just going to have to compromise way too much to get things to be at playable frame rates at 4K. Even though the 770 has 16 gigabytes of memory, it's just not going to perform at 4K. Oh, the 6600. Yeah, it probably is. Yeah, it's strange. Like the the results for Arc are kind of inconsistent sometimes. Sometimes it does like way better than a 3060. Other times it's worse. Other times it's like equal to an AMD card. Sometimes it's like equal to an AMD card that's above its tier. Like for example, in some cases the A770 is kind of close or equal to a 6700 XT, but in other cases it's only as good as a 6600 XT. And in the worst cases I've seen, it's only as good as a 6600 non-XT. So you just kind of have to keep that in mind. So, but it's kind of game specific. I would tell you to go back and watch my review, because I did cover a lot of games. I also did a live stream where I tested a whole bunch of games. Like I think I did like 11 or 12 games, and they range from like DX9, DX11, DX12. I know I tested Final Fantasy XIV, which is an MMO that's very popular, and it did just fine in that title. I tested some shooters. I tested a new shooter. I tested a Gundam-based first-person shooter that came out last year, and it did fine in that game. I tested Apex Legends. It was fine. Not at 4K, though, but it was okay. So, yeah, it's... Spider-Man runs better on the R770 than the 3060. Yeah, and that's in line with like where I kind of think it should perform in general. I honestly think that Intel's original target for the A770 was to compete with the 3070, and the A750 was supposed to be more like a 3060 Ti, but they fell short of their performance targets, so they had to drop the price down to the next tier down, essentially. Do you think the 7900 XT can do 4K well? Yes. Yes, it can. I said that in my review. I said that ideally, the ideal resolution for the 7900 XT is 1440p with a high refresh rate monitor. However, if you wanted to step up to 4K, it's not going to limit you because it has 20 gigabytes of VRAM, which is going to be future-proof for 4K. However, with 4K, the performance won't be as good as an XTX. And that's the reason why, when you're looking at 4K, if you look at 4K, the XTX, it being $100 more, is worth it for 4K. Now, when you look at 1440p, the way I see these two graphics cards are the 7900 XT is so powerful at 1440p that then it makes the question of, is that extra $100 worth it? Because when I tested both cards at 1440p, the FPS average was so high on both cards that I could barely tell the difference between both graphics cards. Yes, the XTX was better, but the thing is, the XT was so good that at that point you're at what I consider diminishing returns. Whereas if you bump the card up to 4K, then the XTX really pulls further ahead by a noticeable margin. So, in that regard, at 4K, then yes, the $100 increase is justified. But at 1440p, it's questionable. You can do it. You'll be fine with the XTX at 1440p. But I think the XT is totally appropriate for that resolution. So I guess to answer your question about the XT at 4K, you could totally do 4K. If you go back and look at my review of the XT, you can see like all the FPS numbers in my tests at 4K were good. Like it was always way above 60 in all the games that I tested. And yeah, so it's just the difference between that and the XTX was like if in one game you're doing like say 101 or 102 FPS on the XT, On the XTX, you're doing like, 121 FPS or 125 FPS versus like 102 FPS on the XT. Meaning at 4K, the percentage difference is greater than 10%. The XTX leads by more like 16 to 20% over the XT, but at 1440p, the gap narrows between them to the point where the XTX is only like 13% faster or like 10% faster than the XT at 1440p. So when you think of it like that, like if the XTX is 10% faster at 1440p and it is also 10% more money, it's literally 1% more performance for every 1% more money. So, that's kind of why 1440p, the value equation makes sense, but at 4K it doesn't, because at 4K, we're talking like upwards of 20, 22% more performance for just $100 more, for 10% more money. So that's the reason why. That's how I evaluated it, and that's how I got to those conclusions. But you'll be fine at 4K if you're running the XT. I mean, heck, I was running the 6900 XT prior to getting those other cards at 4K, and I was doing fine with that older card. But I was noticing that newer titles is where I would see the 6900 XT kind of drop down. And you can see it in the review. All the numbers are in the review. Oh, I do kind of want to play A Plague Tale Requiem. I don't think I'm going to play the first game, but that game does intrigue me. It looks really good. Because, I mean, if you guys have watched my live streams where I'm just kind of randomly gaming, I don't play games that are super demanding, but I'll probably try to pick up more games throughout the year that use more modern graphics rendering. Because, like, I play a lot of, like, single-player action games, or maybe co-op based or multiplayer games, kind of like Elden Ring and Nioh 2. I play a lot of those type of games. I'm definitely going to be playing Wolong Fallen Dynasty when it comes out, so I'm definitely going to test that out on PC and see if they feature stuff like FSR 3 or FSR 2. Maybe if they do DLSS, because I know Nioh 2 has DLSS, but I think Nioh 2 uses the ugly DLSS 1. Which is not worth using. So, I don't know. I have to go back and look at some of those older games. But honestly, like, to me, upscaling is kind of an afterthought, to be honest. Like, I know I've seen Digital Foundry's videos where they evaluate DLSS or FSR or even like Intel's XESS. I even if they claim that there's no loss in visual quality, or even in some cases they try to make a claim where DLSS or FSR2 can actually improve the visual quality in certain scenarios, I feel like those are such rare edge cases that to me, I still don't care. Like, I would still prefer to run the game at native 4K resolution without any upscaling, because I feel like you're far less likely to run into graphical artifacts or any sort of weird distortion in terms of how like the AI upscaled image ends up looking. I don't know. I don't put too much weight into DLSS or FSR for that matter. The first one is really good and looks amazing too for 2019. I feel like when games from 2017 and up, have you noticed, like, I want to say, like, 2017 was the year that games got to a point where they started looking so good, and then after 2017, games, in terms of visual fidelity, haven't really changed a whole lot since then. Because, like, Horizon Zero Dawn was a 2017 game. And that game today still holds up right up there with all the modern titles. And I think Resident Evil 7 was also 2017. And that was an amazing looking game too at the time. Monster Hunter World was, oh no, that was like 2018. But still, like those games looked so good at the time, and I feel like all the games now like just kind of look similar to how those games look. Depends so much on what games you play. Okay, the first one, yeah, I used to use the LSS all the time on the 3060 Ti, but the only game I've used FSR on is on the XT is Cyberpunk. Yeah, because Cyberpunk 4K is like really hard to run, but that to me is just because that game just seems like it's poorly made. Like when you see a game that looks as good as like the Callisto Protocol or Horizon Zero Dawn or even Horizon Forbidden West on the PS5, like when you see a game that looks that good, like, and if you haven't seen Horizon Forbidden West, go look at Digital Foundry's technical analysis of Horizon Forbidden West on the PS5. Now, this is a PS5 game, which will probably come to PC later this year or maybe early next year. That game looks so good. The way they did the water rendering in that game is probably the most realistic water I've ever seen in a video game. And it runs totally fine on the PS5. There's a performance mode where it runs at 60 FPS solid, and then there's like a 4K, whatever, enhanced mode where it runs at 30 FPS. But you can imagine if that 30 FPS high fidelity mode was on PC with these high-end GPUs, like the 7900 XT. I just feel like Cyberpunk is a poorly made game. I don't have Cyberpunk. I've never played Cyberpunk, and I probably never will. Maybe someday if they do like a remastered edition, whatever, Game of the Year. Well, it was never Game of the Year, so they can't do that. But if they do like a director's cut special, whatever, kind of like how they recently updated The Witcher. But if they like redo Cyberpunk, then maybe I'll pick it up. But otherwise, I'll probably never even get that game. The only way I'll ever get Cyberpunk, because doesn't Cyberpunk have a built-in benchmark? I think Cyberpunk has a built-in benchmark. If it does, I might buy it if it's on some Steam fire sale for like $5 or $10. Then I'll buy it. Yeah, and I'll buy it only because it has a built-in benchmark. I'll never actually play it. So I can add it to my test suite, because I'm starting to try to think like what games I want to include for an updated test list for comparison for GPU content, and I'm starting to think I need to pick games to make things easier for me. Ideally, I only want games that have built-in benchmarks. I don't want to do what I did last year, where I had a number of games that did not feature built-in benchmarks. And when I did those reviews, like for example the XTX review, where I had like a whole bunch of GPUs going as far back as the GTX 1080, man, I never realized how long it takes to do benchmarking, to the point where I realized, yeah, I literally just need to choose games that have built-in benchmarks to make my life easier. Because you'd be surprised, like firing up a game, loading up a level, and then having to play through part of that level or part of that area of the game that I want to test. Like, for example, Resident Evil 8, Elden Ring, Halo Infinite. Like, they were really annoying to test. Like, those games were especially... That's why I don't like to test multiplayer games. Like, oh, man. Like, I was thinking of Apex Legends. I'm like, no, I can't test this. And that's why I'll never test stuff like Fortnite or PUBG. Like those, any sort of like multiplayer game that has no built-in benchmark, it's too time consuming. There's too many variables that create like margin of error variances. I don't want to do that. So yeah, if I get Cyberpunk, it'll be on Steam Fire Sale for like $5 to $10, and I'll only use it as a benchmark. That Cyberpunk is basically, to me, Cyberpunk is literally like Ashes of the Singularity. Ashes of the Singularity is such a meme. Like, Ashes of the Singularity is basically a benchmark. It's a benchmark. it's an RTS that literally... It's like a benchmark that comes with an RTS game. It's a benchmark that includes a built-in game that you can actually play with other people. It even comes complete with an AI. You can play against the AI. Makes you wonder, right? Like 3D Mark. 3D Mark is a benchmark. Wouldn't 3D Mark be cool if it like included some kind of tech demo type level where you could literally like run through those areas that it features? I think that would be pretty cool. Well, see, because it was so buggy at release, that's the reason why I could never take it seriously, and that's the reason why I never bought it. I mean, it was so bad that Sony pulled it from the PlayStation Store. Yeah, because I remember back in the around the mid 2000s was when I first got into building PCs and actually playing games and stuff. Like in the mid 2000s, I remember, I don't know what I remember in my mind. I don't know what it was. There was some kind of a tech demo for, I don't know if it was like Half-Life 2 or I just remember being able to run around in first-person view in some kind of what looked like a game world for a first-person shooter, but it wasn't like a full game. You could like run around through the level, and it was first-person view. It wasn't actually a game. It was more like a tech. I don't know what it was. It looked like Tribes or something. It was like some old first-person shooter. Maybe it was like an Unreal Engine 2 or maybe it was an Unreal Engine 2 demo or something. Half-Life Lost Code, maybe. I don't remember. Something like that. I just remember it was like you're in first person. I don't think you had a gun or anything. Like you were literally just like running. You were in this world, this 3D world where you're like running around. You could run through the area, and there was like plants and stuff. I don't remember what it was. Maybe it's Half-Life Coast. I don't know. But it was some old thing though, like from maybe 2005 or maybe it was even older than that. Like I don't know, because I built my first PC in 2006. I think it was 2000. It was the summer of 2006, and I built it so I could play Guild Wars 1 and World of Warcraft. That was the very first PC that I built. Like, before that, so the very, very first PC that I built was literally, like, my uncle used to run... He used to be a system integrator back in the day. So he would build desktop computers for local, like, restaurants and businesses. Like, small, like, SMB market, basically. So he was a system integrator for actual businesses, and he taught me how to build. Well, he didn't really. Well, I guess you could say he taught me, but he kind of showed me. He helped me put together like my first PC. But in reality, the PC was literally just a bunch of really old parts from the late 90s that he decommissioned from clients' businesses that they're not using it anymore. Like, they upgrade their PCs, so he built them new ones and sold them new ones. So then he gathered the old ones, and I guess he was going to recycle or try to resell them for cheap. So he basically like gave me some, like my very first My very first graphics card, I don't even know what it was. It was like an SIS, or maybe it was like a Voodoo 2 or something. I don't even know what it was. Like, I was too young at the time that I don't even remember like what was actually in the computer. All I know was that it was some like late 90s AMD CPU and some like, I think it was 64 megabytes of RAM or something like that, or maybe it was 32 megabytes of RAM. And it had a 3.5-inch floppy disk drive. And yeah, I don't know. The graphics card was a PCI graphics card, not a PCIe. And it was not an AGP. It was a PCI graphics card. That's how bad it was. So I remember I used that computer to play StarCraft 1, Brood War, Age of Empires 2, the Age of Kings, and then the Conquerors expansion. And the thing is, that computer couldn't really run AoE 2 that well. I remember, like, it could run StarCraft really good, but even a potato could run StarCraft real good. Like, that computer was Windows 98. I think it was Windows 98. Maybe it was Windows 98 second edition. I just know it was Windows 98, and it basically couldn't really run like Half-Life at all. Like, I mean, you could load it up, it wouldn't look good, it wouldn't render correctly, and it would run like a PowerPoint presentation. So yeah, that's basically my very, very first PC. But I was too young that like I kind of built it, but like realistically, I think my uncle put most of it together for me. It had like those ribbon cables and stuff, like the, what are they called, the PATA cables, or the serial, no, it wasn't SATA, it was like, it was so old, man, like, I don't even know, like, I don't even know what half the stuff in there was. It was not an ATI card, it was not an NVIDIA card, it was like, the graphics card was some PCI whatever graphics card that could barely run Age of Empires 2 properly or something. I don't know. The CPU was also IDE cables. Yeah, IDE cables. It had an IDE cable hard drive that I think had like 700 megabytes or something like that. It was, or maybe it was like 1.02 gigabytes on the hard drive. I don't know. Maybe I don't remember anymore. Like that computer was so garbage at the time, because the thing is, that computer was so old when I put it together with my uncle that, like, it wasn't even relevant, to be honest. Like, at the time, you know, like in like the mid 2000s, it was basically garbage, because it's from like the mid to late 90s, you know, Windows 98 second edition or whatever, and we're talking like 2004 or something. So it was basically trash. Back at that time, PCs also age instantly fast. Yeah. So, and it was some graphics card from the 90s. And the 90s was when you had like 6 or 7 different choices if you wanted a GPU. And you had like 2 different interface types. There was PCI and there was AGP. And then later on in the 2000s, they added PCI Express. The Matrox Millennium 2 GPU. I don't even know what the GPU was, to be honest. It didn't have a fan on it, I'll tell you that. It literally was a green... It was literally just a green expansion card that had a tiny little heatsink in the middle of it, just right on the GPU die, and that was it. Oh, you had the AGP. I had the PCI Express one. Yeah, so my very first one was XA50 XT. This is what I consider my true very first graphics card, because this is the one that was in the first computer that I built in the summer of 2006. So this isn't even new in 2006. This is from 2004. Well, okay, granted, the very end of 2004. But when I got this, it was already, like a year and a half old when I bought it. So it was cheap. It was cheap because it wasn't even new anymore. But it used to be a pretty good graphics card in its time. And I remember it was PCI Express. So you had the AGP one, I had the PCI Express one. And I remember my cousin was so jealous. My cousin was so jealous of me because he had the X800 Pro. He had this. Wait, I think his was the this one, but his was not AGP. His was PCI Express. I assume there was a PCI Express. So both of us had PCI Express graphics cards, but I think I got disconnected. Do you guys see me? Hold on. I think my internet went out. Are you guys hearing me? You guys hear me? Am I back? It says, okay, it says excellent connection. Okay, man, my internet went out. Oh, it's so annoying. I need to probably do some network test. Okay. Yeah, no, I think it was on my, I think my router or something on my ISP side went bad. Because I was sitting here talking and then I noticed like, I noticed the chat's not updating, and then I'm noticing like no feed, and then OBS starts complaining about unable to reach the server. So then I start doing a ping test, and sure enough, my internet's like not replying. So, oh man, that's the second time that I've done a live stream where my internet. Because I remember there was one time where we were streaming and then my internet went bad again. So, I'll have to look into that. Yeah, that's not good. Okay, well. Okay, so everything's back. But, I mean, the only other thing I'll say is, like, well, there's not a whole lot more for me to say on the topic of the stream. I think we covered that in depth. But, yeah, like, what was I gonna say? Like, my first PC was basically an Enforce motherboard from EVGA, which is hilarious, because you're supposed to use those with NVIDIA GPUs and AMD CPUs. But I put a ATI card in there. I mean, back then, I didn't know anything about PC hardware. I didn't know who ATI was. I didn't really know who AMD was. Now, I learned early on who AMD and ATI were because my first summer job, I got to go to it was an event that AMD held, interestingly enough, and ATI was there, and that was my first exposure to computer hardware companies, way back then. I didn't think anything of it back then. But I remember, like, when we were leaving, my boss was telling us that I remember him saying, as we were walking back to the office from, like, where the event was, he was saying that Intel, he was like, his only comment at the event was, and this was when AMD was really dominating the market. This was during, like, this was, like, before Conroe. Like, Conroe was coming at the time, we didn't know. That happened later in that year. But I remember him saying, like, Intel gives more prizes at their events. Like, I vividly remember him saying Intel gives more prizes at their events. Like, more free, more swag and giveaways and stuff compared to AMD. But, obviously Intel has always been a larger company. But I didn't think much of it. And I just know, like, my first PC, it had an AMD Athlon and then an ATI Radeon card and an EVGA Enforce motherboard. And I had that thing forever until I upgraded to the Phenom, and then I went to Bulldozer, then I went to Intel, and then I went back to Ryzen. So, I don't know. Like, a lot of people had NVIDIA cards back then. Although I will say, like, NVIDIA never had way more than, like, 60% market share in the 2000s. It slowly crept up to the point where at the end of the 2000s, like around 2009, NVIDIA was kind of like 65 65% market share, or maybe 70%, moving to 70% at some point. And then they just kind of furthered their lead all throughout last decade. So, yeah, part of that I think is to blame. Like, I kind of blame AMD for part of that, like mismanaging ATI. Like their resource allocation for ATI wasn't very good, I think. But ATI was very competitive with NVIDIA in the 2000s decade. Like at one point, they were almost 50-50 split market share. In fact, I think during the time when I built my first PC, I think NVIDIA was like 50, around like just over 50% market share, and ATI was like the 49% market share. It was very, very close. It was neck and neck back then. But yeah, like back then, PC hardware changed very quickly, like very often, like to the point where like if you bought one of these, this was like 2004. By the time 2000, like 2 years later, this thing was so outdated by comparison. Wow, this thing was actually $500 back then. Because I got it when it was already like a year and a half old. I think I paid like $210 or $180, something like that for this. These things depreciated really, really quick back then too. That's the other thing. I think I paid like under $200 for this card. I think I paid like $180 for this. I don't even remember anymore. It's been so long. But I remember this card. Because every time I turn on the computer or wake it up from sleep, the blower style fan would just spin up and you could hear it, and then it would quiet down. And that was back when they had full copper. They used a full copper heatsink on these. So it was like you lift it up, and it's like the middle section of it is very heavy because the copper is very dense. But then like everything else is very small, like a single 6-pin. I think I almost got one of these when I upgraded. I almost got one of these. Did I? Okay, maybe it wasn't this one. I don't know. Maybe it was something older than this. Maybe it was the 260. 260? Was there a 300 something? Oh, wait. No, I don't know if it was this. This might be too old. I don't remember what the NVIDIA card was. There was a time when I almost got an NVIDIA card and ended up staying on ATI. I think I got one of these. Yeah, this was my second graphics card. And then so this one, I don't even know whatever ever happened to that one because I don't know where it is. But that was the second one. I got this in 2010. And then I had this until I got my first like flagship GPU, the 7900 XTX Matrix Platinum, and that was a massive change. Like, because, they say once you go to a flagship GPU, it's very hard to go to anything under that. That is actually so true, because once I got this. Like, it's kind of hard for me to deviate from, like, whatever's the highest end tier. Like, because I know I got a 970, but that's because, like, there was no 980 Ti back then. It was the year before, was it the year of the Fury or something? I don't remember anymore, but I remember I got a 970, and it felt kind of weird because, like, this card was like a flagship card, but when I bought it, it was not really the flagship anymore. When I got this, the 290X was the latest AMD card, and the 780 Ti was the best card from NVIDIA during that time. So this was already on a clearance fire sale when I got it. See, I kind of do that. It's like, I don't know, like sometimes I'll upgrade. Last year is a little different because last year, obviously, I way overspent, bought way too many GPUs. But if you guys notice, like, I tend to buy, I don't really have a problem buying the previous generation if you can get one for a good deal. So like earlier we were talking in the chat about Intel Arc, although Intel Arc is not previous gen, but like the 6700 XT, that's considered previous generation, but it's still really good. Like the fact that you can get it way below MSRP, it's really good value. Like in this case, I got one of these way below MSRP because the 290X was the new flagship, and Newegg was trying to get rid of these, so I managed to get one of these. I think I paid like 300 or maybe like 290 to 320. I don't remember the exact like number, but it was somewhere around there for one of these. And this was originally like what's the MSRP on this thing? Does it even show it? I guess they don't know. Well, whatever it was like at launch, it was like really, it was kind of like whatever the 290X was back then, which was like 500 something, I guess. So I don't have a problem buying cards like when they're on their way out. Like the case in point, I bought the 3090 Ti when it was on the way out. Like same thing with the 3080 Ti, although that was kind of a dumb story and that was a big waste of money. But I got one of these when it was on the way out, you know, $1,100. So, because this thing was $2,000. So that's typically how I would get flagship cards. I would get them on the way out. Like, I don't normally buy them when they're brand new. Although last year, you know, obviously the Red Devil and the XT are kind of an exception there. But yeah, typically, which is kind of weird because I was thinking, you know, I got one of these. I don't really use it anymore, although I will use it at some point for content on the channel. What I'll probably do, I'll probably need to do a video comparing the encoder quality of this versus the XTX and see, or I guess maybe the XT. Because at the end of the day, the XT is like a tiny bit faster than this. So if we graph this out, if you guys want to look at power or Tech Power Up's numbers, so 3090 Ti is right here. 7900 XT is, according to Tech Power Up, it's 1% faster. It's a whopping 1% faster. And then the 4080 is 16% faster. So, for those wondering why didn't I just buy a 4080 instead of the XT? Well, the reason why I bought the XT is because I couldn't get the XTX on launch, and I didn't know at the time if these are going to be in such short supply that I'm going to have to spend the next 6 months battling scalpers to get one. So that's why I was like, you know what, I'm just going to get the XT. I'm out. I'm good. I got my reference card. But you know, I didn't know that they would restock them and that no one would want them, so that's kind of why I have one of those. But the real thing that I wanted was the XTX. So that's, according to this is like 21% faster. I'm not sure exactly how Tech Power Up averages this or how they determine this, because I don't know if these, like, how accurate this stuff is. Because they're showing what this is 21. The 4080 is only 16% faster than the 3090 Ti. And then they have 4090 at a whopping 45% faster than the 3090 Ti. So I guess the question is, why didn't I get a 4090? Well, because it was impossible to get one. That's the answer. And it's still impossible to get one. So, but, you know, now with the way things are, it's kind of like, whatever. You're not really missing out much on not getting one of those or this. I got my 24 gigabyte NVIDIA card, so I'm happy. I got my 24 gigabyte NVIDIA card, and I got my 24 gigabyte AMD card. So we got same specs on both in terms of memory. They're both what? Are they both 384? They're both 384. Now obviously the 3090 Ti is like an insane power hog. Because I remember trying to play Star Citizen with this thing, and it started rumbling. The whole case started kind of vibrating. I was like, oh man, this thing's going all out. And then you go in the town, and it becomes CPU bound, and then it quiets down, and then you walk outside on the platform, and then it starts ramping up again. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, it can. I don't like it. I don't like the power consumption. I mean, I like the cooler. I like the cooler. I like the look of it. I just don't like the power consumption of it. But this is the reason why I'm not going to buy a 4080. I gave Nvidia $1,100 for this. I'm not going to give them another, $1,200. They got enough money. There's enough people already complaining about them hiking prices and keeping them up there. Even though we're post-crypto crash, and they still think that it's okay to keep the prices so high. So, yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, the 4080, so the ADA cards are definitely way more efficient than the Ampere cards. And that's just because the answer to that is because TSMC is just way, way better than Samsung's 8 nanometer node. That's the answer to that. So, I think the 4090 is about 20%, because for some reason Tech PowerUp's numbers, they don't scale directly. So it's like, if we click on this guy, 4090 is going to be like 20% faster than this. Yeah, see, 20% faster. So a whopping 20% faster for 60% more money. That's the reason why this card still looks like it's a decent value, even though it's at $1,000. 4080, so like, what's the percentage difference there? Like, the percentage difference is smaller, but it's still like, this is okay, so 25%. 25% for what? This is 1200 and that's 16. Okay, so that's almost linear scaling right there. I think that's linear scaling. Is it? Yeah, that's 25% more. 25%, or is it 20%? No, it's 25% more money for 25% more performance. See, that's the reason why the XTX card, at least at MSRP, actually looks like good value compared to the 4080 and the 4090, because it's like, it's 60%, like 4090 is 60% more for 20% more performance. The other thing too, like the 4080, the other reason why I won't get one of these is 16 gigabytes. 16 gigabytes, like I have a 24 gigabyte NVIDIA card. Why would I buy another NVIDIA card that's only 16 gigs? Now granted, this is good enough. Like, this is good enough for 4K. The same way 16 on a 6900 XT is good enough for 4K. But once you move up to like 20 something gigs of memory, it just feels kind of like a side grade to a slight downgrade to get one of these. So for me, like, going forward, so for those wondering, because it's like there's going to be a lot of content on this channel this year featuring Intel Arc and AMD cards, to the point where it almost will look like I'm ignoring NVIDIA. And that is not to say that I'm going to ignore NVIDIA. I will cover NVIDIA. It's just, don't expect to see content on the ADA, the RTX 40 series cards on this channel. At least not for the first half of the year. If I was going to buy a 40 series NVIDIA card, there is literally, right now, as it stands, there's literally one choice for me, and that's the 4090. There will be no other choice. Like, I'm not going to buy a 4080. I'm not going to buy a fake 4080. I'm not going to buy, anything that's like lower end. Why would I do that when none of those cards are going to match like what I purchased last year? So it doesn't make any sense. So literally there's only one option. It's a ton of money. I could literally spend that amount of money on like a whole bunch of other components and do content on that instead. So it's like, that's probably not going to happen. That's why I'm kind of thinking that later this year, I expect NVIDIA to launch a 4080 Ti in the second half of this year. At some point, after they launch their 60 series card, they're probably going to launch the 80 Ti, And then that is the card that I'm more interested in, because I think they could do like a 20 gigabyte card and call it a 4080 Ti. Better than the 4080, less than the 4090, and price it at, like $1,400. It'll literally slot in right between the two of them. So I could totally see them doing that, because look at when Nvidia launched 3080 Ti. 3080 Ti was spring of 2021. So it could come out in the summer of this year, the 4080 Ti. Or maybe the fall. I don't know. It just kind of depends on what they decide to do, because it was almost a year between the 1080 and the 1080 Ti. So that I could see a long runway of just 4090 and 4080, and then 4070 Ti, 4070, 4060, 4060 Ti, and then 4080. They could do it like that. Then after that, it'd be 4050. And then in 2024, they'll do 4090 Ti. And then after 4090 Ti in the same year, just like what they did last year, they'll just drop like 50 series after that. So that's kind of how NVIDIA is going to play out their hand in terms of product releases, or at least I expect them to do it that way. But that's the reason why. So don't expect to see a lot of content on NVIDIA cards on this channel. I will try to fit 3090 Ti in some content piece at some point. At least I want to. Because so far, the only time you've ever seen me use this card, occasionally this card will photobomb or it'll cameo in some videos. Like, for example, when I did the Thunderbolt add-in card, this card was cameoing in that video. There was another one I can't remember, with the Ryzen 7950X. I can't remember what the video was about. Maybe it was the Live Gamer Bolt or Thunderbolt or something like that. But it was in some video. It was in the power supply video. Yeah. When I featured the MSI power supply that had the special cable for the the video was titled "How to Avoid the Fire," how to avoid the 4090 power cable fiasco. Basically, the ultimate solution that I could think of was just get a power supply that has the cable. So that's what I did. And I kind of showed that because I was able to showcase how that works, because the 4090 or the 3090 Ti has the actual power plug that the 4090 uses. Actually, interestingly enough, it actually uses the 3-pin adapter found with the 4080, because it has a three-way breakout just like the 4080. Even though it uses more power than the 4090. So go figure why they decided to do that. I have no idea. So it's been shown in some content but I want to do something with the encoder. Like, I want to kind of show encoder comparisons, because I feel like so far people think that NVIDIA's like the be-all end-all when it comes to streaming. That is totally false. So we're going to try to show some comparisons there with the new AMD encoder, as well as Intel Arc, because I do think that Intel also does have a very strong showing with their encoder as well. And the thing is, like, Ada Lovelace did not actually change anything. Like, the encoder quality on Ada is exactly the same as Ampere. The only thing that the 40 series gives you that you don't get with 30 series is the highly touted AV1 encoding. That's like the only thing that it has that these don't have, which is a pretty substantial feature to miss out on if you're on 30 series. So that's probably like one of the most the best selling points of Ada Lovelace GPUs, I will say, is AV1 encoding is really nice. But we'll see if that actually is useful within the next 2 years, because if AV1 streaming never takes off on any of these platforms, then who cares about AV1? Like, okay, you can record your gameplay in AV1, but so you can record gameplay in any of the other ones, bump the bitrate up as high as you want, and then it'll just look good enough. So Yeah. All right, guys. Well, with that said, I'm probably going to go ahead and end the stream. We kind of talked about the power issue, or not power issue, the vapor chamber issue with AMD. Hopefully that gets cleared up within the next several weeks. And we've got some interesting content lined up in the near future here. And with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Thanks.